All right. It is time. Let's get started. I first just want to welcome you and say thanks for coming on time. Means a lot. That way we can get started. And thanks for just spending part of your day with me. Let's kick it off. Now, my goal is that by the end of this webinar, you're going to know exact repeatable steps. This is important, repeatable steps to create a song that sounds so good that it could be aired on the radio. Whether you get on the radio or not is not the point. The point is to get a song that sounds so good it could be aired on the radio, and you'll be able to do this within a day. Now, some people will take longer than a day. You might want to spend multiple days on a song. The point isn't that you have to do it in a day, but that you could, if you wanted to, break out a whole day and start making a killer sounding song start to finish in a day using budget equipment, affordable stuff from the comfort of your own bedroom or home studio, which is where most of us are operating. Now, if you stay to the end, if you can stay to the end of this webinar, I'm going to be giving you a little gift, a repeatable checklist for you that you can download, creating songs that are radio worthy. This is a whole thing that you can print out if you're old school like me, or if you want to have it downloadable like on your tablet or your phone. It's a checklist. So when you're working on a new song, you can just go through the checklist and make sure you don't skip a step, or you at least know what to do next while you're working on your song, whether it's just one song or getting it ready for an entire album. Okay, so stay to the end and I'll have that checklist for you as a gift. Now, who is this webinar for? This is for you if you're a singer-songwriter. This is for you if you're a producer. If you're in a band and you're trying to make a record. If you're a mix engineer. If you're just a recording engineer, or if you're just trying to get somewhere in the music industry, this webinar is for you because everything surrounds on having great sounding songs and recordings. Now, in the next 45 minutes or so, you're going to learn the 6 core components of a great song. And this is important because before we even get into production and recording and mixing and releasing music, you got to know what are the core components of a great song. I'm going to share with you, obviously, the 10-step process for recording and mixing your own song for what you could call label quality, radio quality. The point is that it's something that you're really proud of and do it in under a day. I'm going to show you why you don't need to rent a studio or hire a mixing engineer, how you can actually turn your bedroom into an ideal recording space. We're going to talk about what order to record instruments in and vocals in to get the tightest performance possible. Talk about choosing the right microphone to get the best out of your vocals, which is super important, and even how to give your songs that wow factor by using simple things that are powerful like EQ, compression, and some other tricks and tactics, okay? Now, a couple reminders. You got to be passionate about music, okay? That's the one thing I can't give you. I believe you're passionate because you're here. You're taking time out of your day and you really, really care about this. The part I can help you with is making your music sound as good as possible. That's why I started the Recording Revolution over 7 years ago. And that's all I do here at the Recording Revolution is try to help you make your music sound as good as possible. So you have to bring the passion. And just remember that having a great sounding song doesn't guarantee you any success, okay? Doesn't guarantee you any success. You still have to work on your career and your art and the human factor, but I can help you with getting the song to sound good. And then finally, just some housekeeping. I would highly suggest switch off your phone. My phone is not even anywhere near me in this room. I don't want to be bothered because I'm here for you. I don't want to focus and I don't want to be distracted. So I'd ask the same for you. Switch off your phone or put in airplane mode or something. So we're going to actually cover a lot and we don't have a lot of time. I want to give you some substance and take care of you. All right. This is the me slide. I think most of you know who I am. Some of you might be real new to the Recording Revolution, and I just want to make sure you're up to speed on who I am. I've been a professional mix engineer, recording engineer for over 15 years. I've been playing with this stuff for 18, 19 years, recording and mixing. I started the recordingrevolution.com back in 2009. The whole point was to help my friends originally who were musicians to get better sounding songs without expensive equipment. That was literally what I was doing with my friends. I just took it online. We've got over 200,000 monthly readers, over 24 million YouTube views, and it's been awesome to be featured in places like Huffington Post, Avid, Waves, on Pensado's Place, Yahoo, and a bunch of other places. So that's who I am, and there's my big old mug. All right. I've also just been privileged and honored to work with some of the most amazing people in our industry who are doing fantastic work and who are also amazing human beings. And I'm grateful to call them friends and to be able to work alongside them. And I'm totally humbled that these people actually like read my website. They watch my videos, read my articles. It means a lot to me because these guys are top of their game, and I have a lot of respect for them. And they're really good people too. Lots of other people, and these are some of my faves, some of my buds. All right. I want to be straight with you that like I'm not this guru here. Like I've done a lot of things right, but I've just also done a lot of things wrong. That's how I've learned a lot of this stuff, guys. I've done a lot of things wrong. It wasn't always the way it is now. I wasn't always as good as I am now or as confident as I am now in my music making. And I really actually want to share a couple stories with you real quick, really briefly. I'm going to paint this picture for you. I've been freelancing for, like I said, over 15 years. And here's me doing this is some remote gig I did. I flew into Virginia and recorded a band in some dude's house years ago. But I remember recording and mixing something. It was a mixing project. Mixed in a single for a guy. Worked on the song. He paid me up front, so I'd already collected payment. I deliver the file to him, and I always do revisions. I always have a couple of revisions with my clients. And I said, okay, here's the mix, man. Let me know what you think. And I never heard back from him. But he'd already paid me in full, which was rare. He wanted to pay me up front. I never accept payment up front, at least not in full. And I never heard from him, so I assumed all was good. And I move on with my life, and I'm working on other projects. And then about 3 or 4 months down the road, I finally get an email from this guy, and he's saying, hey, man, I never really liked the track you did for me, and I went ahead and hired someone else to mix it. And I've already paid him, and we're good to go. I would like to have my money back, if possible, from the mix you did for me. I was just devastated, man. I was just so frustrated because I had done the best work I could, delivered a good product, and he didn't even give me the chance to make revisions. He just, I don't know what happened. He just moved on and wasn't satisfied with it. And I had to give him his money back. I did all the work. Of course I'm going to give him his money back because I don't take people's money who didn't get what they wanted, didn't get what they expected. So in my mind, that's stealing. So I give him his money back. That's fine. But I just want you to know that, like, I don't always knock it out of the park. And this is one of those examples where I just felt like embarrassed and frustrated that I didn't even get a chance to deliver what I hoped to deliver to him. And that's a part of real life. Okay. It doesn't always go away. I still make mistakes. And I'm a guy that, I fiddled around with this stuff in my bedroom for years. I went to audio school because I really wanted to learn how this worked with really talented professors and also really talented students in my music program there. I worked in a $5 million studio in Virginia for a while that was loaded. I mean, it had an SSL console, gobs of rack gear, multiple live rooms, a mastering suite upstairs. It had a ton of stuff, and I've learned a lot. And I've made a lot of mistakes and got to play in a lot of scenarios. And by basically saying that I've learned the stuff I'm about to teach you the hard way, and it took me over 15 years of just fiddling and making mistakes and figuring out what strategies actually worked for me, and in particular, what worked for me in a home studio. And I'm going to share those things for you on this webinar. Now, here's the hard way. Here's the hard way you can learn stuff, okay? I don't want you to have to do this. Spend years trying to figure out how to get your songs to sound good. Years. Who wants to do that, right? Try to connect with more experienced mixing and recording engineers and producers to learn their strategies, and then hope that it works for your songs. Spend tens of thousands of dollars on equipment, hoping that better equipment will result in better sounding songs. I mean, I've been there. Or just pay someone else to mix your stuff, and only to find it still doesn't sound the way you imagined it in your head. And that's what's super, super frustrating. So the question for you is, would you like the easy way? The easy way that ensures your songs sound ready, quality enough to be put on an album without spending thousands on renting out a studio. I've done that. Hiring mix engineers, recording engineers. I've done that. If you're ready, let me know. Leave me a yes in the chat box. The easy way is what I'm trying to give you today. Here's some of things that my students, people are saying yes, the easiest to work with for me. Let's do it. Yes, says Bishop. Yes, Brian. Yes, Paul. Here's just some of my favorite little testimonials from some of my students. Bobby says, the recording revolution is what inspired me to complete my album and put it out. My song's been on 3 radio stations. I'm doing shows. I finally have somewhat of a buzz. That is a huge win. Here's Mike from Ireland. He said, Graham, excellent course. Thank you. I had a track refused by national radio as it wasn't considered broadcast quality. Remixed it based on your process. Boom, it's getting radio time. Hug it out. And then Jake says, before last month, I had no idea how to mix music to professional standard, but as I'm self-funding a double album from a home recording studio, I couldn't afford to hire a mix engineer in a studio. And this week, a friend of mine who speaks their mind, listened to 6 tracks from the album, and he was blown away by the quality of the mix. All I did for each song was follow your instructions step by step. I love that. Here's another a case study from one of my students that I love. Ben from the Sun City Rockets literally had no mix training. He said, literally none. I subscribed to the Recording Revolution about a year ago because I wanted to get my music to sound good, and I've released it independently. I watched your videos religiously for months and months, trying to learn everything I could about mixing. And then he goes and records an album where his vocals were recording with an Audio-Technica AT2020. Now, this is a $100 microphone. This is one that I recommend in my studio gear guide, an AT2020. Use that microphone into a Focusrite Scarlett. Guitars went into another $100 microphone, the SM57, to the same interface. And to get this, he mixed it in his bedroom on a pair of Logitech computer speakers. Not even studio monitors. Logitech computer speakers. He sent the songs out to a couple of labels in Hungary, where he's from. All of them were interested. Not only that, I got signed last October to the largest Hungarian label, a subsidiary of Warner Music. They didn't even request a new mix of my songs. They just had it mastered. That's how much they liked the sound of my mix. And that is super Recording Revolution stuff right there, okay? So, would you like to learn how to create songs like those guys that are worthy of being played on the radio, whether you get on the radio or not? Give me a yes in the chat box if you are ready. Yes, Cole, Jeremy, Sasha. Yep, Patrick. Let's do it. So before I show you the 10-step process for recording and mixing your own song, you got to understand what I call the 6 core components of a great song. All right, let's get into it. Number 1 is lyrics and melody. So before we can even talk about recording a great song, you have to have a great song, friends. And there's so much that goes into great songwriting, and everybody writes songs differently, but there are 2 huge components of a great song, and those are the lyrics and the melody. Now, with the lyrics, you can write about whatever you want, and you can write really flowery, poetic stuff or very simple conversational stuff. What matters is that the lyrics convey something that the audience can relate to or they find interesting. Tell a story, maybe a human emotion, maybe an experience that other people can relate to. Show some passion in your lyrics. And here's a little tip for you is have at least one little line in the lyric that is really memorable, like a way you phrase words together that other people haven't done or that's interesting or there's some alliteration. That one little piece, they might forget all the lyrics, but they remember that little phrase. Have one of those little lyric nuggets in there. And then as far as the melody goes, a bunch of ways to write melodies, right? A million great melodies. They can be really complex. They can be really simple. But just like with lyrics, melodies are what get stuck in people's head, and that's what allows them to remember the lyrics. So melody is super important. And what you want to do with melodies is at least have one nugget of a melody that's super catchy. You could have really in-depth melodies in the verse, but at least one moment, so with the way you put the notes together, that is that little golden nugget that gets stuck in people's heads, okay? It's a tool. I'm not saying you have to write pop music if that's not your thing, but you need to have something that's memorable so people go, oh, I love that song. They call it to mind. So remember, craft a killer lyric and a killer melody before you even think about recording. Now, the second component is arrangement in production. You still haven't recorded anything yet, but arrangement is, okay, you got a great song that you think is good, lyrics and melody in place. How are we going to take the listener on a journey with the arrangement? From the intro to the outro, what are you going to do with the song? What are you going to do to make the song interesting? What kind of instrumentation are you going to use? You can't have the same boring thing over and over again. You need some variety. So you're going to have to think about good arrangements. The best way to learn how to arrange music, my friend, is to listen to a lot of great music that you like. And take notes. Write down, what is the intro feature? Is there just a vocal? Is it just a beat? How many instruments are here? What happened in verse 1? Compare verse 1 to verse 2. You'll notice that verse 2 is different than verse 1, okay? You really, really want to have differences and moments that change throughout the arrangement. And while you're doing that, you think about production, which is, okay, what kind of sounds am I going to use if it's a loop library, or what kind of virtual drums am I going to use, or samples or virtual instruments? You're sort of gathering your sounds, and that goes along with the arrangement. Okay, third component, I think this is straightforward, recording. This is where you're actually going to capture all the sounds into the software. And if you're new, this is probably all you think recording and making music is about, is capturing those sounds. And it is a component. As you see, it's only one of 6 components of the core components, and it's going to be, the steps are going to be broken out a little bit more. So this is where you're actually recording your vocals, or capturing the instrument, or playing the drums, or even programming beats. You're actually creating and capturing the performance in your software. Number 4 component is editing. And you don't want to skip this. We're going to talk about this in depth. This is huge for your stuff to sound good. A lot of my students, they record and they maybe mix a little bit and they want to release it. It's not ready to be mixed if it hasn't been edited. Editing is really all-encompassing. It's cleaning up sloppy performances. It can be vocal tuning. It can be tightening up or comping vocals. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about in editing, but this is really the cleanup phase. You know, this is making sure everything is tight the way you want it to sound. Finally, mixing, not finally, but number 5 is mixing. And this is presenting those well-recorded, well-edited tracks in the most amazing way possible. This is now, how do you create the wow factor so your songs go from, okay, I hear the song, to I feel the song and it is jumping out of the speakers. We're going to use things like EQ, compression, delay, effects, things like that to present the songs from kind of flat to wow. And this is a huge part of what I teach on the Recording Revolution, because it's complex for some people and it's hard at first. But when you get this piece right, this can make or break a really, really well recorded song, right? And finally, the 6th component is mastering. And this is that final quality control before you release it to the world. You're kind of getting final volume correct for broadcast quality. You're doing final comparison to other tracks to make sure that tonal wise, it really compares. Like, you want to make sure that your mix can play on a Spotify playlist next to some other professional song and not sound really, really whack, okay? So all of these are important. There's no one real part that's more important than the other. They all are critical, and they all make a radio-worthy song. Now, I'm going to show you my 10-step process now for recording and mixing a song in under a day. So this is all content here that I want you to really zero in on, take notes, and follow along. If you're brand new, this will all be important for you. If you're not so new, there might be elements of this that you're already doing and other elements that you're missing. So whatever it is you need the most help with, whatever jumps out to you is like, wow, that's most interesting, please take note of that. That's probably the thing that you're supposed to take out of this, but I want you to take all of this away if you can. All right, let's do it. Step number 1, set up your recording space. Now, most bedrooms or basements or home offices or whatever just don't sound good, friends. They just don't sound good. And that's a problem. You've got bare walls, which are your nemesis. They cause nasty sounding reflections, meaning if you make any sound when you're recording, hitting a drum, strumming a guitar, singing, that sound is going to bounce off of all the bare walls in your space, okay? Your microphone isn't just going to hear you singing into it, or isn't just going to hear your acoustic guitar, or isn't just going to hear your piano, or isn't just going to hear your drum. It's going to hear that, of course, but it's also going to hear that sound bouncing off all the walls and then reflecting back into it. And it's going to smear the sound because it's delayed. It's going to have a nasty tone to it and just cover up the beautiful sound that you have. You could have the greatest sounding voice and a great sounding microphone, but in a bedroom, it could sound awful because of these bare walls. The other problem you have is windows and doors, right? You know this, they let in outside noises. You don't have a completely isolated space. That's one major problem in a bedroom. You know, again, a lot of the microphone techniques that you learn from people in real big studios sometimes don't apply, because in a home studio, you don't have the luxury of a perfectly quiet scenario. So you got windows and doors, they're a problem. Small rooms, this is why tracking rooms in nice studios are big, because small rooms are a problem. They create weird resonances. The smaller the room, the more of an opportunity for certain frequencies that are nasty to build up, and your microphone hears that as well. So that's a problem. And then the natural reverb in your room isn't really appealing, okay? It's not very appealing. So it's not that reverb is bad, having natural reverberation in your room, echo in your room, but in most bedrooms, it doesn't sound very good. So it doesn't add anything. So these are some major problems with recording in a bedroom. So the secret to getting a good home recording is and how you set up your room. And here's some really actionable things you can do. First of all, as it relates to mixing position, and this will be important when we get to the mixing process, where you put your computer and your desk is really, really important. And if you really want to make a difference, I would suggest rearranging your room based off of your recording desk. Some people don't like this because it's inconvenient for where they want their bed or something else, or it's worth it to me. So put your desk, your computer at one end of your room. So if your room is a rectangle, let's say, you've got two short walls and two long walls, put your desk or computer at one of the short walls, okay? Put it so it's all the way close up to a short wall, and then you have the length of the room behind you, okay? Now, this is because sound is going to sound better when you're mixing as the sound waves go the long distance of the room, the length of the room. You don't have that back wall as close to you as the other way around, so it's not going to reflect as much when you're mixing. It'll help your mix position and allow the sound to develop. Now, you don't want to be completely up against the wall. The reason for this is your speakers, if they're completely up against the wall, walls, and especially the corners behind them, will accentuate the low end. They'll accentuate the low end in your speakers, which it could be a good thing actually. If your room is really low end light, it's a really thin, bright sounding room, that might be helpful to you. But most of the time, in my experience with home studios and mixes I hear, people put their speakers too close to the wall. It builds up bass, which sounds good to them, so you don't notice it's a problem. And then you mix your song, and the problem is you don't mix enough low end or don't record enough low end, because you hear plenty of it in the room, because it's really the walls building it up and the corners building it up. So when you play your song out in the car or somewhere else, it sounds really thin. It's very bass light. It's because the bass was never in there and you just couldn't hear it. So be at one end of the room, but don't be completely up against the wall. Another thing you can do is, I love bookshelves. Bookshelves filled with books are a great free acoustic treatment. So if you've got bare walls, have some bookshelves, become a reader, buy a bunch of books, and fill them up. They absorb sound on your walls. When I was working at Mix with the Masters a couple years ago in the south of France, the beautiful studio there, Studio La Fabrique, they don't have acoustic treatment on the walls. They have bookshelves filled with records. They have one of the largest, if not the largest, collection of records in all of France in that studio. And imagine how thin they are. Filled up bookshelves with records on the sides of the mix position for the acoustic treatment. You can do the same thing with bookshelves. I have books in here that take up an entire wall. Plus, it makes you look smart. So bookshelves are great. And then for recording, what you want to do is make space in the center of your room for recording. So if your bed is in the center of the room or you got furniture, do whatever you can to get that furniture to the side of your room so that you can have the center of your room, the place that's farthest away from your walls, as your recording space, okay? That's where you're going to do most of your vocal recording, most of your acoustic guitar recording. I have a small room, guys, and I can put a drum kit in here, and I still want to put it in the center of the room, as away from the walls as best I can. So just find the center of your room. Don't be close to walls, because again, walls reflect nasty sound. Try to be in the center of your room if possible. Now here's a little studio setup tip for you. If you don't have carpet, if you have hardwood floors or tile or anything like that, then put a rug underneath your desk chair. That's what I've done. I have hardwood in my studio. And the reason for this is if you have a reflective bare ceiling above you and then a reflective wood or tile floor below you, you've got now sound bouncing up, down, up, down, up, down. It's going to continue to go up and down, and it won't stop because it's going to bounce off each other. It's floor to ceiling, floor to ceiling. You want to stop that reflection at some point so you can simply put a rug under your chair where you sit or where you record and where you mix. That way, any sound that does reflect up will eventually stop when it hits the floor. It won't have that continuous back and forth. Okay? That's step one. Some tips for you there to set up your recording space. It is really not that hard. If you do those things, you will be able to get a much better sound for at least your setup. That's how I would set up a bedroom studio today. Now, step number 2 is actually recording the instruments. Now we get into the nitty-gritty. So here are some helpful tips for you in actually capturing the performances, okay, and actually recording the tracks. And this is exactly how I do it, and this is what I would tell you to do, is create a guide track. If you just open up your software and start recording, you're skipping a really, really important step, okay? Your guide track is going to be your map. It's going to be your map for where to go and how the entire band, or if it's just you, will be able to get a really tight, polished recording. This is really, really important. Number 1 is set up a metronome or a click track for the song's tempo. Now, I did a YouTube video on this. Click tracks get hated on all the time, and they're usually only hated on by people who are inexperienced and haven't really done a lot of recording with a click track because they're frustrating at first. I admit I hated click tracks too when I started because you feel like you're getting all over the place, and it's because you actually are all over the place. You don't have as tight timing in your head as you thought, because a lot of musicians these days are fiddling around and recording, and they don't have years and years of musician experience or gigging and playing with tight musicians. And if that's you, that's okay. You just need to practice to a click track. This will help you not only in playing more in time, which is what you want your music to sound like, not robotic, but in time. People like music that is not all over the place. This will also help you in a later step when we get into editing. Okay. Now, if you hate that sound of a metronome, that boop, 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 you can just use a loop. Use a drum loop. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Just have a simple drum loop that is in the vibe of the song and keeps the tempo. Okay. So this is really important. You also want to create markers in your software for each section. So you can do this in Pro Tools and Logic, any of these DAWs where you create a visual line that kind of goes down your software. And it says, okay, here is the intro. Here is the chorus. Here is verse 1. Here is when the drums cut out. Like, I'll do notes for all kinds of stuff. Here's where the lead guitar part comes in. Here's where the vocals get loud. Here's where the harmonies come in. You can have as many markers as you want. Map this out now so that as you're producing your own track, you don't have to guess, okay, is it bar 58 when we come in? You can just quickly see, all right, let's do 2 measures before the loud drum part, and everybody knows where you are, or you know where you are. So go ahead and set up those markers now. And then what you want to do is record what I call scratch tracks. These are tracks that play part of the song, but you're going to delete later. So for me, a lot of times I write guitar-based music. It's going to be an acoustic guitar playing all the chords of the songs. So I know the sort of rhythm and the vibe, and I also know when the chord changes are, and I can hear when I'm in the chorus, I can hear when I'm in the verse, etc. So I have a scratch guitar, and then I'll also have a scratch vocal for sure. If it's not me, I'll get the lead vocalist in here to sing the song along with the guitar. This could be also a scratch piano. It could also be some loops you've created or a synth or whatever you want, some basic instrument that holds the chord changes, and then the main lead vocal, so that we all know when the song is, okay, and where the song's going. These do not have to be perfect. They do not have to be in tune in terms of the vocals. It doesn't have to be this beautiful performance. This is just a guide, so we all know where we are. This is going to be fed into our headphone mix to know where we are. These will be deleted later. Cool little story, though. Probably 10% of the time, the scratch vocals that I record for my own stuff, parts of those get used in the final vocal. And the reason is because there was no pressure when I recorded the scratch vocal. I just sang. And some phrases of that vocal will come out sounding so darn good because I was so relaxed and not really stressed that I might take one word or one phrase and put it in the final vocal track. And I'm going to talk about that later and how to do that. So scratch vocals can sometimes come and surprise you, which is awesome. Now, work from the bottom up. This is important. In terms of when to record and what to record, I like to start with drums or percussion and beats first, okay? Always start with that because for me, I want the entire rest of the instrumentation to be tight with the rhythm and the drums. So if the drummer is playing live and he or she does something really cool, I want the rest of the band or rest of my stuff to be influenced by those drums. Or if it's a beat, the beat is going to really be what people are driving their head to. So you want the rest of the band to play to that. So I feel like drums and percussion are the most important thing. So I want those to be recorded first. And you can see why having a scratch vocal and a scratch guitar or piano before you record the drums is important for that poor drummer who doesn't hear anything. That way the drummer can hear the metronome, the guitar or piano and vocal, etc. So drums first, then I'll do any bass or synth part. Bass synth or real bass guitar part. So the point of this is the bass is usually best sounding when it's tight with the kick drum, no matter what the genre. And it's just easiest for the bass player, I think, whether you're programming the bass or playing a live bass, to really tighten up with the drummer when that's the main instrument or the only instrument that's recorded. And that way, then you as the producer, as you're listening to it and you're thinking through it, or if you're just recording your own stuff, you can focus on the relationship between the kick drum and the bass in the recording phase. That way you know it's tight before this song gets really filled with a bunch of tracks. All right. A little heads up too, I'm going to do a Q&A towards the end of this webinar, so save some of your questions. I'll be able to answer them when we get to the Q&A. Next, I'll add all the guitars, keys, other main instruments, all the mid-range stuff. My rhythm is taken care of. My low end is taken care of. Now, if it's guitar-based instrumentation, I'll do that. If it's strings, I'll do that. If it's keys or synths, I'll do that. If it's other loops, I'll do that. All the main stuff then is built on top of that, okay? We're talking about instrumentation here, okay? We're not talking about vocals yet, just instrumentation. That's the order I like to do it because, as the last point says, this creates the tightest performance possible. And you want it to sound tight on recording day so that you don't have to do a lot of crazy editing later. All right? Little recording tip for you. This one's huge. I preach it over and over again. Please record with more conservative levels. And what I mean by this simply is whatever your audio interface is, whatever your the volume knob for channel 1 or channel 2 in your little box that you're recording into, don't have that cranked. Watch your software meter when you're recording and testing it out. And if that meter is really high, like 75% of the way up or higher, you've probably got the gain knob on your little interface too loud. There's no need to have it that loud because if you clip, the converter just doesn't sound good. So turn that volume knob on your actual box down a bit. Look at the meter in your software so you're seeing about halfway up the meter to 75% of the way up the meter in your software. You'll have a much cleaner signal that you can make as loud as you want later, but your converters will sound better. Trust me, you'll just get a better sound, period. All right, let's talk about vocals. Super, super important. Let's start with choosing the right microphone. Okay, so many people want to skip this. They want to just grab a microphone that somebody said is good and just go with it. Now, it's great to start with recommendations. I make recommendations, but what's most important for you is finding the right microphone for the right vocal, okay? Now, most vocalists, on average, will benefit from a condenser microphone. These are those typical microphones you see in a studio where they're singing into the side of it. They look very fancy. You don't hold them in your hand. Those are typically a condenser microphone. And the reason is that they have very sensitive capsules inside, and the diaphragm can capture the slightest nuance in your voice, the whisper, the breath, the mouth noise in a good way, everything about your voice in a beautiful way it can capture it. So most vocalists, I think, will benefit from a condenser microphone. That's why I recommend them as a starting point. Now, if you're going to do louder or more like aggressive vocals, you might consider a dynamic microphone, something like a Shure SM57 or 58 or an SM7B, any dynamic microphone. The reason is it's a totally different type of technology where it takes way more sound to move the coil inside the microphone, just meaning it's made to handle really, really loud sounds, and it won't pick up a lot of the nuance in a good way. It'll just capture the vocal. So these are your typical stage mics that you see on stage at a club or at a bar or at church or wherever. If I'm doing a really aggressive rock track, I'll even sing into an SM57 because it really just captures the vocal great and it doesn't overload the mic. A lot of rap vocals, if I'm recording rap vocals or anything I've seen in studios where we're doing rap vocals or hip hop vocals, if it's aggressive and loud and really percussive and just a lot of sound coming at them, a dynamic might be a better choice. Now, every mic does sound different on every voice. So If you have more than one mic, try it. Try all of them on your voice. If you're going to be recording a lot of your vocals, it's worth to take an hour or so and do test recordings on all the mics you have. Borrow some mics from a friend. Rent a mic. Whatever it takes to try your voice on a different microphone, because once you find that mic that really captures your voice well, the way the mic is EQ'd inside and the way your voice sounds, man, it's going to save you a lot of time later because the voice will kind of mix itself later. And a little tip here is make sure that your microphone is set to cardioid if it has multiple polar patterns, or just bicardioid mic, period. So most microphones are at least cardioid, and the really fancy ones can do different polar patterns. What does this mean? It just means cardioid microphones, they capture sound mostly from the front. So you can basically minimize sound at the back. And that goes alongside this. Well, we'll get to that later. That goes as a tip I got for you later. But I think the cardioid is what you want because it's going to minimize sound at the back and not really pick up sound all around you, because you don't want to pick up sound all around your really bad sounding room. We established that, okay? So choose the right microphone. Cardioid is the key. Then here's another key is distance, okay? Most people get a little too close to the vocal microphone. And the problem with this, if you are going to go cardioid, is the closer you get to the mic, the more bass response you get, okay? This is something called the proximity effect, and this can work to your advantage if you really need a lot more low end or beef in your mic. If you don't, if it sounds too, if your vocals always sound too like muddy and woofy, and you're always trying to clean them up, if that's like the language you're using, it's probably because you started recording too close to the microphone. And by too close, I mean 6 inches is probably too close. Get a foot away from the microphone, and you'll have a much more balanced tone. The second thing with being too close to the microphone, your volume will be all over the place. So like if you move your head slightly while you're singing and getting into it, or the vocalist is moving his or her head slightly, the closer you are to the microphone, the more that distance left to right is exaggerated in the volume that the microphone hears. This is because of something called the inverse square law, and it's really a fancy way of saying back up from the microphone a little bit so that when you move your head, the microphone doesn't hear an erratic change in volume. The volume will stay about the most consistent it can be. The closer you are, the more crazy volume swings you're going to have in your vocal recording, which means you're just going to have to do more work later with compression that you don't need to do. So like I said at the last point, I recommend standing about a foot away from the mic. That's going to probably fix those two problems. You won't have the bass build up, and you'll have a more even vocal volume. And this is going back to the cardioid point. Why you want to use a cardioid microphone is not just because Graham said so, but because there's a very good reason. The back of the microphone on a cardioid mic rejects sound the most. So you can use this to your advantage in a home studio where, like in a nice studio, it doesn't matter where you put the mic and sing vocals, because anything it picks up is going to sound fine. In your home studio, that's not the case. So there's sounds you want to minimize. That might be the loud computer fan, right? That might be, you know, people talking outside your window or your door. That might be cars outside on the street. Whatever it is, point the back of your microphone to that, because the microphone will then reject that sound the most. Whatever the back is pointing to is what it's going to make the quietest in the microphone. So use that to your advantage when recording vocals. So be in the center of your room. Like I said, be a foot away, get the right mic for your voice, and then turn yourself around so that the back of the microphone, or basically what you're facing, is the thing you want to reject the most. All right? Let's move on to editing your tracks, the thing that most people skip. All right. Here's what I want you to do when you're thinking about editing. You've recorded all the instruments, let's say. You've recorded your vocals. You can't move on until you do some of this stuff. And one of those things is cleaning up the lead vocal. The lead vocal is so important, okay? The lead vocal is what's going to sell your song, assuming you have vocals in your song. If you do instrumental music, you can skip this. Now, a couple things you're going to want to do, and I do every single vocal production I'm working on. Number one is comping. What does this mean? It means if you recorded multiple takes of the vocal, right? So you've got your vocalist in, or you're the vocalist, you sing through the song, You're like, great, that was pretty good. You sing through it another time and you keep both takes. Maybe you sing through it a third time. You keep 3 takes. Or maybe you just sing through the bridge that third time because that was really hard. So now you have 3 takes of the bridge, 2 whole times through the main song. Now you've got all these takes, okay? What do you do with those takes? Well, you could just pick the best one, or you can mix and match the best parts of the best ones. And this is what all the pros are doing. I guarantee you there's not a single, or 99% of the time, let's just say 99% of the music you hear anywhere on your favorite records or on the radio, that vocal performance is not one vocal performance. It is a combination, a composite of multiple vocal performances, okay? So that's what comping is. It's a composite. So you take the best parts of each song, and this is very easy to do in most digital audio workstations. So find out how to do that in your software where you can look at the different takes and put them together. This is worth taking the time to do because then you get the best representation. I call it a super take or a mega take of the vocal performance. Now, the next thing you want to do is clean up any loud and annoying breaths, pops, or clicks, okay? So I will review songs for people or give mix critiques from time to time, and the mix might sound great, but I can still hear like weird breaths. I can hear their mouth noise, like crinkling and crackling. That's unacceptable, friends. That's not professional. This is very easy to delete and clean up and still sound natural. Even the breaths. I'm not saying you get rid of all breaths, although that's a valid way to work. I have records that I like where that's what the producers did. But go through and just clean up stuff that's distracting and annoying. Listen through it. And if you hear it and you notice it, you should get rid of it if it's annoying. So that's a huge part of what you do. You comp the vocal, then you go through and get rid of the breaths, pops, and clicks that are annoying. Then you do any tuning if needed, okay? Not always does a vocal need tuning. On my last 2 records, I didn't do any tuning on my own vocal. The parts that might have needed tuning, I just sort of said, you know what? It sounds fine. I'll leave it. You might just need to tune one phrase or one note that was held out because everything's great about it except for that. Or they might need a lot of tuning, and that's okay. Things like auto-tune can be great and quick. Just pick the key of the song, adjust the retune speed, and go for it. But something like Melodyne, and now since Melodyne has been out for a decade or more, a lot of other people have created vocal tuning software that's Melodyne-esque, where you can physically grab the notes and move them. This is great because you can actually have more control over the notes, and you don't have to tune everything. You can leave everything alone and just move one note up or down by 30 cents or whatever. It's pretty nice, so you have a lot more control there. And here's a tip for you. Always tune a copy of this comped, cleaned up lead vocal, not the actual lead vocal. So you can always go back to the original. This is so important. So what you want to do is you've done this composite of the vocals and you've got the best take of it now. You've cleaned up the annoying breaths, pops, and clicks. Now what you do is you duplicate that vocal, make a copy of it, and you name it like vocal tuned, and then you tune that one, okay? Don't tune the regular one, tune a separate one, because if you need to go back and you realize, dude, I really overtuned this, you want to have the original. Or if you just want, like, you tuned everything, and sometimes I'll have just that one phrase sounds better when it wasn't tuned, and I'll copy and paste it from the untuned version onto the tuned track, and I'll have a blend of the two. Make sense? All right. Now, editing, that's how I edit vocals. The other thing I would zero in on for editing is the bass and drums, okay? When you listen through the song, what I want you to do is don't do what I did for years and years, which is try to like edit everything you see that's off. Okay? Don't look at things. Listen to things. Try to be like a listener. Listen through the song with your eyes closed from start to finish. And when you notice something that sounds like distracting on the bass or drum timing, that's when you need to perk up your ears and say, okay, this needs fixing. And what I would like you to do is do manual, old school cut and paste or sliding parts around that need a little bit of help. I'm not really as much of a fan of like Beat Detective, although that's not too bad, or like time stretching and compression, although they sound better. I'm not really a fan of those things as much as I used to be, because if you do a lot of that, you actually can start to hear it and it sounds processed. And what I want you to do is to have the most organic but tight and amazing sounding track, as if that's just the way it was played. And let's be honest, nobody's perfect. No drummer's perfect. No bass guitar player's perfect. you might have just one little thing that needs to be nudged a bit, but I want you to be as sparse as possible and listen to it like a listener. And only when you hear a bass or drum timing that's off that distracts you, that's when I want you to do some manual cut and slide. I don't want you to force things on the grid. The grid this is why you record it to a click, is to see the grid. It's helpful for cutting and pasting whole sections. It's helpful for comping the vocals like we just talked about. But the goal isn't to make things sit on the grid. The goal is to make them sound like they're in time. And you'd be amazed at how loose things can actually be visually and still sound in time to our ears. Because our ears, we don't like perfection, although we can handle perfection. It's fine. We actually are cool with things being slightly loose, but there's a point where it's too loose. And that's where you want to listen with your ears. And when it feels too loose to you, then go tighten it up and listen by ear. Now, a little tip here, if you're going to do any multi-track drums, like if you recorded multiple drum tracks on a kit, you want to group these tracks together before you do any cutting and pasting, because you want them to move together. You don't want to be moving the kick drum separately from the snare drum, because there's drum bleed on both tracks, okay? Very, very important. Here's a little editing tip for you. Like I said, a little goes a long way here. Perfection's not the goal. Lack of distractions is. And this was really hard for me to get, guys. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, it's probably only in the last 5 years that I've finally gotten better at this. I'm a perfectionist by nature. I'm such a perfectionist. So what I do is want to make everything perfect. And I got really good at making things perfect. I'm a beast at Beat Detective and Pro Tools. I'm a beast at time stretching. I'm a beast at vocal editing, tuning. I would do everything perfectly. I would tune things perfectly. I would tighten up drums, every hit perfectly. I got really good at it. And what I made was like perfect, shiny, shimmery music that people will go, that's cool. But I didn't know what was missing, and what was missing was any kind of human vibe to it. And I kept telling myself, well, I want it to be tight and polished. I don't want it to be super vibey. But I was making a false dichotomy. I was saying, oh, you have to have one or the other. And that's not true. You can have something that is nice and tight, but it's not perfect. And it feels pretty darn good. And that's the point here. All right. Doing good so far? Let me know in the chat box if you guys are doing good so far. Jerry gave me an amen. All right. Let's move on. Good, great. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Here we go. Step number 5 of the 10-step process. Okay. This is really, really important. Create a static mix. Okay. A static mix. What is a static mix? Static mix is a balance between just the volume fader and the pan knob. Okay. Here's where I went wrong in mixing, and here's where most of my students go wrong. Maybe you've been there. When you think of mixing, when you get a piece of software like Logic or Cubase or Sonar, Studio One or Reaper or whatever you use, you've got all these fancy tools and plugins, all these effects you can use, and things that you see me using maybe of like, wow, I want to EQ, I want to compress, I want to use saturation. And we want to so quickly throw those in to the mix, no pun intended, and get after it. And that is the absolute worst way to start. And I know, because that's how I started for years. So what I would say is I would start with the old school live mixing mentality. You pretend like you don't have any plugins. You pretend like, man, I've got to get this mix to sound really good. And all I've got, my only 2 weapons are the volume fader and the pan knob. Like I said right up here on the screen, mix like it's a live show and simply balance the fader so it sounds good. If you think you've done this, you probably haven't really done this to its full potential, okay? I really want to challenge you. When you're done with this webinar, the next time you go mix a song, I want you to spend at least 20 to 30 minutes doing this. And what I like to do is loop the song. I'll loop the song so I don't have to start and stop. I'll select the whole 4, 5, 6 minute song, whatever, loop it, press play. Now the song is playing. It's like it's a live band in front of me, okay? I can't stop them. I can't say, oh, let's go back to the verse. They're just playing. I'll let them play. All I have at my disposal is volume fader and pan. So what you want to do is, what's the best volume for the kick drum, the bass guitar, that harmony vocal, that mandolin, that synth, that beat, those hi-hats? Like, you don't know. So you pull up the faders, you click around, you try things. You go, okay, that's too loud. Oh, that's cool. And then you bring in the strings. Oh, no, that's not good. It's an experiment. Let yourself be free here and just flow with it. And don't worry about plugins. Pretend like they don't exist. Like this is your only shot. So you're doing that with a volume fader. You're also starting to do panning. So panning is that cool knob or slider that allows you to take something, a track, and move it anywhere left to right in the stereo spectrum. Do you want that shaker to be all the way on the left or up the middle or on the right or somewhere in between? Yeah, Chris says more cowbell. Where do you want the cowbell? How loud do you want the cowbell? You can do all this, right? So the point here is create a balance with just those two tools. You should be able to really be digging the song at this point, okay? You should really be digging the song at this point. If you're not bobbing your head yet, you're not ready to move on to plugins. You need to create a balance of the song with volume and pan that after 20, 30 minutes, sometimes I'll spend an hour on this, guys. Sometimes I'll spend an hour. I'm just looping the song, balancing volume and pan, and all of a sudden I'm like, dude, I love this song. If you're at that point, you're probably ready to move on. If you're not at that point yet, you probably don't have the right balance. Because here's what happens, friends. If you move on, you've basically put tracks that aren't at the right starting spot. And now you have to use a bunch of plugins to make them sound great when a lot of times they're just too quiet or too loud. You might be EQing and compressing something down the road to get it to stick in the mix when all you needed to do was just turn it up. And man, I've done that. I literally, guys, I had a bass guitar a couple months ago. I was mixing, and I've got EQ, 2 compressors, distortion, saturation, harmonic exciters, all these plugins. I think I had 6 plugins on it just to get it to sit in the best way possible. And it wasn't working. So I finally said, okay, let me take off all the plugins. And I just moved the volume fader up 2 dB. And the bass sounded awesome. All right, like sometimes you just need it at the right volume, and maybe I went too fast in this static mix. So don't rush the static mix is what I'm saying. All right, here we go. Static mix tip. Set a timer for 20 minutes. Literally, I said 20 to 30 minutes, but don't just guess. Literally set a timer. I do this on my iPhone. You can do this on your computer. You can do this whatever you want to do. And once I'm ready for a mix and the tracks are labeled and they're in place, I literally set a timer because what it does for me is I know that the time is ticking down. And when I know that time is ticking down, I won't just like live in la la land while I mix and do the static mix. I'll statically mix with purpose. And I'll say, okay, what's the most important element of this song? And I will just focus on that. And I'll just not overthink things, because if you're like me, you will overthink. So if you have the timer, it forces you to go, I don't have time to overthink. Let's move quickly. Let's focus on the big wins. I cannot stress enough how important step 5 is, the static mix. If you skip this, you're going to have a really hard time with everything else that comes afterwards. And I don't want you to have a hard time. I want this to be easy for you. So it seems like you're wasting time, but you will actually save time by spending the time now on the static mix. All right, let's move on to step 6, EQ, which, if you didn't know, stands for equalization. Okay? Now, there are basically 2 steps to EQ. Step 1 is clean up the bad. Okay? And the EQ is such a powerful tool. And it's my favorite tool because this will make or break a mix. If I only had one plugin, it would be EQ. That's all I need, okay? This allows you to simply turn up or down the volume of certain frequencies within a track. Basically, that's all an EQ is another volume fader. But it's smarter because now you can say, okay, instead of just turning up the bass so I can hear it, maybe there's just certain frequencies on the bass that I need to turn up so that my ear goes, there's the bass. Because not every frequency of every track is needed to be the most prominent, hence an EQ. Okay. Now here's the way I like to view EQ: is start by using it as a subtracting tool. Carve out or reduce or take away the frequencies that just don't sound good. People ask me, how do you know this, Graham? Well, to me, this is really simple. You have to experiment when you're new, But when you pull up, let's say a vocal, let's take, it's just a lead vocal, you kind of need a boost, get a big EQ boost and sweep around, meaning slide up or down the frequency spectrum and listen. Just listen to what the different frequencies of that vocal sound like when you excite them and exaggerate them. What does 100 hertz sound like on that vocal? What does 1,000 hertz sound like on that vocal? What is 10,000 hertz or 10K? Sweep around till you hear what sounds really nasty. And a lot of times what I'm listening for in the home studio is the nastiness of my room. This is the beautiful thing about EQ and carving out things is you might have a nasty frequency in your room that you can find and then carve out, and it makes your vocal or your track finally sound clearer because you're getting rid of the bad stuff in your room. Some other things you might want to consider are rolling off low end of most tracks with a simple high pass filter. This is because this is one of the simplest things you can do if you want to quickly clean up your mix. Is just so you understand, not every track in your mix needs stuff below 80 hertz or stuff below 100 hertz. It's not really adding to the sound of those tracks like your vocal or acoustic guitar or electric guitar or synth, but it certainly is covering up things like a kick drum or a bass synth or a bass guitar. So one way to make your low end have a lot of weight and the rest of your mix sound clear and crisp is to use these high pass filters. They're also called low cut filters, and roll off things below 80 hertz or 100 hertz on things other than the kick drum or bass guitar. I've even used high pass filters on kick drum and bass guitar. So it just depends on what it sounds like, but it's a simple tool that you already have in your EQ. Again, we're emphasizing cutting and cleaning up the bad. And then, like I said, remove any frequencies that your room is probably emphasizing that just don't sound nice. I really want you to spend time with your EQ on this, thinking about cutting first, because it gets you at a better spot. If you've done the static mix, your tracks are sounding so good because you've balanced them well, you've recorded them well, they're panned probably where they need to be, you can hear everything for the most part. Now we're cleaning it up even more. We're cutting out the stuff that just doesn't need to be there to reveal the best parts of your tracks. All right? Now the second way to view EQ is as an enhancing tool. Enhance the good. So now we can talk about boosting, and that's what most people want to do with EQ because it's easier mentally to think about boosting than cutting. I understand that. So now think about using EQ to boost the frequencies that you want to hear more of. There's nothing wrong with boosting, but I prefer to do it after I've cut out the stuff that really isn't necessary because already your mix will sound better. Because there's a little tip for you. The way speakers and headphones work is they're like pushing and pulling a speaker cone, okay? And it's electromagnetic, like pushing and pulling a speaker. If you take away, let's say, low end on a vocal by using a high pass filter, that vocal now has less, the speaker cone has to do less work on the low end now on your vocal because there's less information it has to push, so it can present the rest of the frequencies, the mid-range and upper mid-range, better. It might be a little like over your head, maybe not, maybe I didn't explain it well, but reducing frequencies that don't need to be there allow your speakers to present what is left better because it has to do less work. Very, very important, okay? So now we've got that at a good spot. Now it's time to boost, okay? So I'll do things like fatten up a bass instrument, okay? Give a little bit more low end at the sweet spot. Or I'll brighten up the lead vocals or the strings or synth. One thing to consider is use more modest boosts of 3 to 6 dB to keep things sounding natural. You may not like boosting something only 6 dB because you can't really hear, but it makes a huge difference. And if you're doing 3 to 6 dB boosts across all your tracks, if you were to then take away all those boosts that you did over the past 30, 40 minutes or whatever, you would hear a massive change. And that's the point, is the cumulative effect of these things. So don't go for massive boosts. I'll boost something pretty big to make sure I'm hearing the right frequency, and then I'll dial it back to between 3 and 6 dB. So again, you're cutting on the stuff that doesn't need to be there first, then you're boosting. And in general, when in doubt, just bypass. Just bypass or turn off the EQ plugin that you've been working on to make sure you're actually helping the track, okay? Sometimes you just will work and you'll EQ and you won't really actually be doing any good. And you get used to whatever you're hearing. We lose perspective so quickly as mixers that unfortunately you could be doing 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes of EQing, bypass the plugin and go, wow, it actually sounded better without any EQ. And that's a great tool for you, is bypass every 10 minutes or so to make sure you're actually helping, or every 5 minutes. All right, here's a little EQ tip for you. Consider putting your mix in mono while you EQ. So you're listening to your mix in mono while you're making your EQ decisions. And this is really, really helpful. This prevents you from looking at stereo panning as the way to get separation, because panning will fool you and think you go, yeah, now I can hear the guitar on the left and that on the right. But if you collapse them in mono so that you don't have stereo panning, you realize that it's really hard to hear your tracks. That means that the EQ isn't correct. You should be able to hear everything clearly without any panning, because in reality, most people will not hear your mix in perfect stereo. You're in a mall and your stuff's played on the radio, people are hearing a mono mix coming out of the speaker. Your iPhone is a mono mix. The laptop speakers, by the time they hit your head, it's a mono mix. Unless you're sitting in your studio in between two speakers perfectly placed, or unless you have headphones on in a super quiet environment and you're doing nothing else but just listening, you won't notice the panning decisions. So the EQ has to be what separates tracks. And that is why I really recommend you listen to your mix in mono while you make your EQ decisions. And then, of course, when you're done EQing, you can put it back to stereo and keep the panning, but it helps you make the right EQ decision. All right. Doing well so far? We're going to move on to step number 7, compression. All right, guys. This is if EQ is the most powerful plugin you have, compression is the second most powerful. And getting this right will make a huge, huge difference. Okay. The way you want to think about compression initially is this, is you want to control the dynamics of tracks. So basically compression is where people get really thrown off because it can really jack up your mix. It's basically a smart volume fader in a box. It allows you to automatically turn things up and down. That's all it is. You can hear something and automatically turn it down or up. Now, I like to use compression to tame a lead vocal, okay, and make each word and syllable sound clear and upfront. This is probably the best way to think about using compression. Vocals are all over the place. You have a certain syllable, and it can be louder than another syllable. You sing and you can be quiet in the verse, loud in the chorus. They're very dynamic, but in a recording, you have to hear it without hardly any dynamics, really up front. And the only way for that to happen is a compressor. So I'll use it to sort of tame the lead vocal. Some simple tips for you is slow attack times and slow attack settings are more natural, okay? And they're more gentle, as are fast release times, kind of the opposite. So the attack setting is what like pounces on your audio. So the slower the attack setting, the more gradually it pounces on your audio. It's less aggressive. And sometimes you want fast attack settings. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying slow ones are more natural and gentle. And a fast release is more natural because it lets go of the compression as quick as possible to allow the next peak to come through, the next audio wave to come through and not be compressed. So what I recommend you do is experiment with both. Really fast, really slow attack release settings to see what it does to your track, and just leave it where it sounds best. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of attack and release settings. Like I will take the knobs and go all the way to the left and all the way to the right and just listen, and you'll hear what it does. And then you can back off once you find the right spot. Okay, so think of compressors as a way to control dynamics of a vocal, of an acoustic guitar, of a crazy string performance, okay? Now, a tip for you is to watch the gain reduction. This is how you know how much compression to do. What matters most is not like what the knob settings are. People ask me, Graham, what's the best setting for your attack or your release? The best setting for your threshold? Don't ask questions like that. That answer does not exist because I would have to ask you, okay, can I look at your gain reduction meter? That is the only way to know how and where to set the knobs. So what you do is you go to the loudest peak of that track. So if it's the loudest part of the vocal or the loudest strumming of the acoustic guitar, whatever that section is, you loop it, press play, have the compressor on, and look for conservative amounts of gain reduction, like 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction on the loudest peaks. So fiddle with the attack, fiddle with the release, fiddle with the threshold, fiddle with the ratio, fiddle with all four of them while watching the gain reduction meter or the gain meter or whatever, the GR meter. And that is where you're going to know if you're doing enough compression or too much by seeing how much it does. Yes, that's a guideline. You can do less or more, but that's a safe zone for me is when you're getting some compression, but it's not going to sound squashed. And then leave the knobs wherever they are. And then you want to be sure to turn up the makeup gain or the gain knob at the end to make up or balance the compressor's output. So if you compress it, you're basically turning down the audio. And that's not your goal, is to just turn down the audio. Your goal is to turn down the loud parts of the audio. It's not going to turn down the quiet parts. It's going to leave them unaffected. That's what the threshold does. So now the makeup gain brings everything back up. So now you have this consistent volume from in before your compressor to after your compressor. But now the quiet parts are just as loud as the loud parts. And that's the beautiful thing about a compressor. Now, a little compression tip for you. You can make a track sound fatter or just have more energy simply by adjusting the attack time. So I want you to do that. Like take a snare drum. Next time you're mixing, grab a snare drum. This is a good example. Put a compressor on it and then set some settings and then grab the attack time and go as absolutely fast as you possibly can. What you're going to do is you're going to be squashing the peak a lot and then turn up the makeup gain. So again, it's balanced to the same volume. So now it's the same volume. You're going to have a much fatter, longer tail on the snare drum. It's going to sound fat. Do the opposite. Turn the attack time all the way as slow as possible. And what you're going to do is you're going to have a lot more punchy snare drum. It's going to have more energy. It's going to like cut through faster. It won't be as fat, but it'll have a lot of like energy. And this is great for like acoustic guitars where you need them to cut through and have energy. Slow attack time allows them to do that. So compression will trip you up, and I'm not going to lie, this will take you the most time to get good at, but I want you to not be overwhelmed by it. Just play with the knobs and look at the gain reduction meter and listen. If it sounds awful, it is awful. And if it's not sounding good, then take it off and try again. All right, step 8. At this point, we've done the bulk of the work at this point, although it's actually relatively simple. We have recorded really good sounding tracks. We have done the most important part of mixing, which is balancing the fader and the pan knob. And now we've done some EQ and compression to clean up the bad, enhance the good, and control the dynamics of a track, which allows us to present the tracks in the even better way possible. At this point, though, the tracks are probably still as dry as they were before, you started. Now is where we can really put those tracks in a sense of space and make them a little bit more interesting. So one thing you can do, especially since you're in a home studio, is give your tracks some glue. So if you're recording in a small bedroom, or like my studio is I built out in my garage, very small room, the tracks are going to sound dry. They're going to sound small because you didn't record it in a nice live space. Now reverb, you've probably heard of that. That can help give you a sense of space. So what I like to do, this is a little trick for you, is just put all your tracks through the same subtle reverb. And I call this the reverb glue or the glue track. And you can create like an auxiliary track or a bus that you put the one reverb plugin on, and then you route all your tracks to it through a send of some kind. And you don't need to send much of it, but it's going to then create basically a return of like all your tracks as if they were played in the same room. And it adds some sameness and some depth and some glue to all your tracks, which is really, really nice. Now, what I recommend for settings is start with room settings. So if you have a reverb plugin, your stock reverb should work fine. I use the stock Pro Tools one called Deverb. There's probably some presets, but there's probably some settings too, like what type of reverb. Do you want a hall? Do you want a chamber? Do you want a room? Do you want a plate? I would start with a room. So the room type is going to mimic a room sound. And that's what we're trying to do here is put our tracks as if they were in a better room. And you can listen to different rooms that you have. And then you can also even tweak the sound of those rooms. And then another great way to start is a plate. A plate might be a good place to start. A lot of reverb plugins will have a low pass or a high pass filter on them. It's worth rolling some low end off and some top end off as well in the plugin, because you don't really want the reverb to put too much mud in your mix that you just worked hard to clean up. You just want to have that sort of room sound. Now, another popular effect is some echo. Now, we achieve this with what are called delay plugins, but if you're new to recording, you probably think of it as like an echo sound. And I love delay. I prefer it to reverb for the more obvious effects. And here's what I like to do is I'll put some on a lead vocal or guitar specifically to give them an affected sound. So if you don't put a reverb or a delay on anything else, try the lead vocal or your lead synth or guitar sound. Because what you can do is then put that lead vocal in like a unreal space. It just sounds like they're in the heavens coming from somewhere else. And it really is just cool. It helps people know that this is a studio track that's just been done and it's been spiced up a bit. And what I would say to do is to start with some quarter note delays, eighth note delays, and then 16th note, and see which feels right. If you're a music nerd, you'll probably have reasons why one would be better than the other, but just go with what feels right. Some songs, the quarter note delay really is what the lead vocal needs. It just repeats at the right vibe of your song, and it'll kind of flow and echo in time with the drums. Sometimes the eighth note sounds better because it's a little more lively, and then a 16th note or a 32nd note really can sound like a slap back delay. You don't notice it as like this echo as much as it sounds like your voice is slapping off of the back of a wall, like a small club, and that can be really cool too. Listen to a lot of Black Keys records. You know, Chad Blake, when he mixes those records, you're going to hear a lot of really short delay times to make them sound like they're in a small club, in a blues smoky club, right, playing, and that's all fake. That's just a really fast delay time on the lead vocal. You can do the same thing on the lead instrument as well. Like I said, I like to EQ out high frequencies on reverbs, but I really do it on delay. So my go-to is I'll run the delay, get the amount of delay going, get the timing right, get the sound of the delay, but then I will literally either in the delay plugin or I'll insert an EQ after the delay and do what's called a low pass filter, or it's called a high cut. And that allows you to roll off or clean up the top end. I don't want the echo or the delay to be as bright as my vocal. I want it to be more muffled. So I will do a more muffled echo. That way it doesn't take over my mix. You just sort of hear it, notice it, but it's a little more subtle. Really, really helpful tip there. Don't just do it the way it comes out of the delay box. Always roll off some top end. And like I mentioned, this is a really important tip. I don't want you to miss this. Don't put these effects directly on your track. Okay, so when you're thinking, oh, I want some reverb on my guitar or my vocal, or I want some delay on that lead guitar part, don't insert the actual plugin on those actual tracks for two reasons. One is it's going to mess up your volume balance of that track. Second reason is if you want to have 10 tracks with the same reverb, that's 10 reverb plugins. That's going to hog your computer's power. So instead, create a new bus or an auxiliary track, depending on how your software calls it, and insert the delay on that track, and then insert one for your reverb. And then use sends or buses to send a little bit, copies of your tracks into those reverbs and delays, and you can control how much or how little. You still get the control of I want more reverb on the vocal and less on the acoustic guitar, but it's all going through one plugin instead of a million plugins on all the individual tracks. Make sense? You guys hanging in there? We're almost done here, and I'm going to be taking questions. I'm really excited about that as well. And again, I got a little gift for you at the end. We got 2 more steps. Here we go. Step number 9, sweetening your mix. I love step number 9. And most people skip step number 9. I don't want you to skip this step, because this is the step that all the stuff that you love has gone through. Yes, Chris says we need snacks. Will you get me a snack? I could use a snack. If you listen to something on the radio, if you listen to your favorite tracks on the record, on your favorite records, especially if they're not radio songs, doesn't mean everyone does this. The best producers in the world are paid to be brought in for this exact purpose, and that is sweetening your mix. What is sweetening? Okay. Here's the deal. An engaging mix from start to finish is the goal, not just a good sounding mix sonically. And this is very important for you to understand. I get it. You want your stuff to sound awesome. So you're so focused on sonics. That's why you're here. That's why you follow me. Graham, how do I make my drums sound awesome? The vocals to pop, everything to sound huge. I get that. One thing you're going to miss, though, is how to make your song sound awesome from start to finish in time, not just in a snapshot, but is the song interesting to listen to from start to finish? Now, we addressed this in part one in arrangement, okay? When we talked about the 6 core components earlier today, the arrangement makes a huge difference. At this point, though, we can still take that to the next level by what I call sweetening. So like I said here, well-produced songs, if you listen to them, go listen to them after this. Notice how interesting and engaging they are from first beat to final note. There's always something new happening. I want you to say, like, when you listen to one of these songs, ask yourself, is it interesting here? Okay, so forgive me. Listen to one of your songs. When you're mixing, you think it's sounding good. If you think you're almost done, this is when you need to ask yourself this question. You go back to the beginning, turn off your screen or close your eyes, press play, listen, and ask yourself honestly, is the mix still interesting now in chorus 2 or verse 2 or at the bridge? Is it still interesting? Or if I'm honest with myself, would I change the radio station at this point? And if you don't have the perspective to ask yourself this question, you're definitely not ready to release it. You might need to bring in somebody else, like a friend. But you need to answer this question, because if the song is like, sounds great, but verse 2 comes along and it's exactly the same as verse 1, just new lyrics, you got a problem. People are so used to well-produced songs that they will tune out the moment they hear verse 2 and it sounds exactly the same as verse 1. Same thing with the chorus. Same thing with the final chorus or the bridge. Everything has to be changing. So here's some thoughts for you if you're in the mixing phase. Is one, try adding some vocal harmonies. If you haven't already recorded them, sometimes I don't know yet, man. Sometimes in the recording phase, I added everything I thought it needed, but it really needed some more. Okay? And if that's the case, I'll pull up a microphone, even if it's not my band, and I'll record some vocal harmonies and make sure it doesn't sound like me. But if it really adds just a texture, I'll do it. Or some synth pads. I'll be like, you know what? I really need some strings here. Just, you barely hear them, but something that makes you go, ooh, there's something new there. Okay? Now, another thing you can do is consider muting parts or deleting parts at certain moments in the song to create like a sense of a drop. This is really, really done well in a lot of modern music. Either in a simple way, like don't use all your tracks at the beginning. Keep it more sparse at the beginning so you're bringing in elements. So don't bring the acoustic guitar in right away. Save it for verse 2 or something. It might have already been recorded, the whole song. Well, delete part of it or mute part of it. Or take something away and do the opposite. Chorus 2, make it real sparse, or verse 2, take away things, or drop out just to the beat and the vocals and then bring the music back in, even if it's for one measure or for one beat sometimes. This kind of stuff can make you just, the listener, go, oh, that's nice. It's like giving them a little tasty treat, you know? Don't just give them a good steak. Give them a good steak with some tasty seasonings on it that make them go, ooh, what is in this steak seasoning? What is it? You want to give them something a little sweet, okay? Now, another part of sweetening is automation, okay? At this point, we've got the volume faders and the pan knobs where we want them, but to make a mix really come to life, you want to harness the power of your software's automation. So you can literally automate volume faders going up and down. You can automate pan knobs going left and right at only different parts of the song. So here's some examples of why you'd want to do this. I do this a lot. You can consider having like the tracks panned more narrow in your verse, kind of more coming up the middle. It'll sound great because you've EQ'd it well, compressed it well, balanced it well. But then in the chorus, you automate the pan knobs on a bunch of tracks, so all of a sudden they go out wide, and all of a sudden the mix sounds like it got huge all of a sudden, especially if you're on headphones. Really, really simple to do. You're just automating the pan knob, okay? Another thing to consider is using automation to turn on or off all your effects throughout the song. So I will do this all the time with delay. I'll like have a delay kick on or off on a certain word, or have more delay in the chorus and then bring the delay down a little bit in the verse so there's not too much echo in the verse and not too little echo in the chorus. It's hard to get a delay to be the perfect setting for the whole vocal for the whole song. Now, the listener will think it's the perfect level all the way through, but underneath the hood, my friend, is a lot of complex automation that took some time. It's not hard to do when I say complex, but if you look at the automation, it looks like a lot. But you just go through and you say, man, I really wish this track were up the middle for this part, but on the right for this part. Automate it. Or I really wish this effect would come on just for a second. Automate it. You can do all that kind of stuff. So when you think about sweetening, you're thinking about instrumentation and parts and muting and deleting parts. You're also thinking about automation. If you skip this, again, you'll have maybe a good sounding mix, but it's not gonna be radio worthy. It's not really gonna hold up with the stuff that you really like because it hasn't gone through the sweetening stage yet. Here's a little sweetening tip for you. Here's how you get good at this. It's really simple. Go listen to your favorite songs on good headphones, and then take note of every different element that they use to keep things interesting. And you simply copy their ideas. Okay, this is how you start. Go listen to your favorite record right now, or not right now, when you're done with this webinar, and then literally write down everything you hear as like an idea, and you copy that, because there's not that many ideas anyway, and your song is totally different, but it'll give you an idea of like, oh, make your next mix like, I'm going to do the narrow thing in the verse and the wide thing in the chorus, and do that for a few mixes. And then when you listen to another song, go, oh, they actually have nothing on the right side at all in the verse, and they leave the right side empty and they bring it in the chorus. Or there's no delay in the verse and there's lots of delay in the chorus. Like, listen and copy and implement and try, and then you will find out what you like. All right. The last step of the 10-step process, and before we dive into your Q&As, mastering your song. Okay? Really, really important. There's a lot we could cover. Obviously, I'm going to try to give you the main nuggets. This is really, really important, and I don't want you to skip it, whether it's one song or an album. Now, when mastering, we think about mastering, there's a lot to think about. And back in the day, mastering was literally just taking the mix and putting it on the medium to distribute it. So getting it out of the studio and putting it on a record, on a piece of vinyl. That's all mastering was back in the day, making sure the levels weren't too hot when it went to the vinyl. Actually cutting a record. Okay, that was mastering. These days, there's a lot more that can be involved. But here's what I want you to do. When you think you're done, basically, I want to simplify mastering for you. When you think you're done, bring in a recording of a professional song into your software and compare it to yours. Okay? Pay attention to a few different things. The low end. Okay, what does the low end of this really awesome, amazing professional song sound like compared to mine? What does the top end sound like compared to mine? What is the vocal level sound like compared to mine? And then the kick and snare drum level. That's your 5-point checklist for referencing a professional master. I hope you write these down. You don't have to worry about almost anything else but these 5 things when referencing a professional master. Is what does my low end sound like compared to their low end? What does my top end sound like compared to their top end? Where's the vocal level compared to their vocal level? And then where's the kick and the snare compared to their kick and snare? And you ask yourself, what about this pro mix sounds better than my mix? Why does it sound better? Because it will. I mean, it happens to me. I bring in a professional one. I'm like, dang, this sounds so much better than mine. But you ask yourself, okay, what is it about this pro mix that sounds better than my mix? And what adjustments can I make? You can do EQ stuff. You can do volume. You can adjust the snare. Sometimes I'll bring it in and go, wow, my vocal is not loud enough. And I just grab the fader and turn it up. Very, very valuable stuff here. So don't get overwhelmed. Just go to work and adjusting your mix to sound closer to the reference. Now, you got to keep in mind that the pro mix is going to sound a lot louder than yours right now, okay? Because it's done mastering. You haven't mastered yet. So when you bring it into your software as another audio track, pull the fader of that volume of that master down so that it's about the same volume as yours. Otherwise, you'll be really depressed. We'll like louder stuff better than quieter stuff. So bring it down in volume so it's the same level as yours, anecdotally, and then you can make a fair comparison. So this is a huge part. If you do that 5-point checklist, low end, top end, vocal, kick, and snare level, while referencing a professional master at the same volume, you will do that final gut check on your mix. Now, the second half of this is bringing your song to commercial loudness. Now, your mix is going to probably be a lot quieter than a professional mastered song, and we want to fix that. So here's the fastest way to fix that. Use your DAW's limiter plugin. Every software should have one. It's called a limiter or a compressor limiter. As long as it's got the word limiter in it, grab that plugin, put it on your master fader as the last insert, okay? The very last thing in your chain after any of the effects you might have used on your master fader. Set the ceiling of your limiter to minus 0.5 dB, okay? It's going to be set at 0, which is the top. Find the ceiling, or I don't know, it might be called output, but it's probably the ceiling in most limiters, and pull that down from 0. Don't leave it at 0. Pull it down to minus 0.5 dB. Then go find the threshold knob and start pulling that down. Two things are going to happen. One, your mix is going to get louder automatically. And then what I want you to do, though, as it's getting louder, you like we did with the compressor, you watch the gain reduction meter and make sure that it's not hitting, the gain reduction is not hitting more than minus 4 dB on the loudest peaks. Okay? So the way to do this is I go to the loudest part of my song. Go to the loudest part of your song, and that might be the final chorus or the final hook, and loop that. That's the part you really want to measure this on. While that's looping, that's when you do this. And you don't want minus 4 dB constantly. You want to just see like the peak. Like it's probably going to be the snare drum, maybe the kick drum. You want to see it flash on the screen briefly, no more than minus 4 dB. Minus 1, 2 to 3 is probably more ideal. But that when you get to minus 4 on a peak, as the loudest peak of the song, that's when you know you've pulled the threshold down far enough, and your volume will have gotten louder the entire time. So you're going to be in really, really good shape. Make sense? All right. Now here's a mastering tip for you. I don't want you to miss this. You're probably working at a sample rate of, let's say, 44.1 kilohertz or 48 or 96, or if you're crazy, 192. And you're probably working at 24-bit or 32-bit floating point. The point is, whether you know what that is or not, that's probably a setting you're recording and mixing at. But when you're ready to render this thing down or bounce it down or mix it down to be an MP3 to share, to be a wave to go on a CD if anyone uses CDs anymore, or whatever it is, even MP3s, they need to be 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz, okay? And it has to be stereo. So if it's going to go to a CD, or you want the broadcast like high quality CD quality, that's going to be a wave. That's uncompressed, 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz stereo wave. Or you can do an MP3. And if you're going to do an MP3, you can make a really good sounding MP3. I didn't put this on the screen, but render it at 32 kilobits, 320 kilobits per second. A 192 kilobits per second MP3 will still sound good, but 320 is super high def MP3 that to me sounds just as good as a wave and will get the job done. Okay? Everybody doing good so far? So here's just a quick review so you can just see where we just came from. Here's the 10-step process, and you can't skip any of these. I really don't want you to skip any. You set up your recording space. If you don't set it up in the right way, your recordings won't sound good, and your mixes are going to be not going to sound that good. You're going to record instruments and just focus on them in the order I told you and the way I told you. You're going to record vocals and get those to sound amazing with some of those steps we talked about with distance and the right vocal mic. Editing your tracks. Don't skip this. Professional tracks are always edited. And now when we get into mixing, there's sort of 5 elements of mixing, and it starts with a static mix, step 5. This is where you're just balancing volume and pan, okay? And then you get into actual plugins, starting with EQ, okay? Now, EQ is, again, your most important tool, so you're subtracting the bad, you're enhancing the good, you're bringing in compression after that to really control the dynamics. And don't be afraid of attack and release settings. Just sort of experiment to see and hear what they do. You're looking at the gain reduction meter to know how much compression to do. Then you're bringing in reverbs and delay effects to spice it up a little bit. Then you're going to do the step that most people skip in the home studio, which is step 9, sweetening. This is really the final art of production and making every moment of the song interesting and engaging from start to finish. This is really what's going to get people to take notice of your songs and not want to turn them off. And then finally, the mastering your song, where we talked about really 2 parts: referencing a professional master and making sure the low end, top end, vocal level, kick and snare level are the same, and then getting it to commercial loudness with a limiter. Those are the 10 steps. Now, would you agree that we've spent some good time in this past webinar. Would you agree that this has been a good chunk of time well spent for you? Has it been valuable to you so far? I hope so, because you've committed time to me and I want to add a ton of value to you. Yes. Cole says yes. Tom says yes. Extremely. Heck yes, absolutely. Good. Good. I want to make sure this is helpful to you. So as you can imagine, I can't cover absolutely everything possible in an hour webinar. I would love to. Even if we had a whole day, I couldn't cover it all. And some of you might be feeling overwhelmed about what I've shared, and I've honestly only scratched the surface. So don't worry if you're overwhelmed. Don't worry if you wish there was more. I'm trying to cover the core stuff here, but it's totally okay. And what I've got for you, I want to help you out some more. I've got something that's very special for you. It's going to allow you to get even more, everything that you need in order to create the great sounding songs in a step-by-step way. And in fact, if you act fast, I'm going to give you something super, super crazy that I haven't offered anywhere else. So, should we good? We keep good? Keep going on? You guys good? Sweetening Bix was awesome. Getting some good feedback. Good. All right. So, let's go deeper. You have 3 options. The first option is you spend tens of thousands of dollars on recording and mixing engineers and renting out professional studios. This is what everybody did when I was growing up. If you were lucky to spend that kind of money, good for you. But the problem is it might not even sound the way you want it to after all of that, and then the money's wasted. Okay. Second option is a little better, but still not good. You go it alone. This is kind of my option, is what I did. You spend tens of thousands of dollars. You try to figure this stuff out on yourself, wasting maybe 3 to 10 years of your life. You'll jump from tutorial to tutorial, hoping you're learning the right stuff in the right order over the next few years, right? Hopefully, right at the end of it, your music will start to sound the way you want it to. Now, neither of those options is ideal because it's either costing you time or it's costing you money or a lot of both. Now, I've seen guys, and I've been one of the guys that has spent thousands of dollars to get something done professionally, and it didn't sound the way I wanted. My band back in the day, that's what got me into home recording, is we went in the studio, paid a lot of money. He did a good job, but it wasn't the way we wanted it to sound. And that's frustrating. I've also been the guy who spent years of my life trying to figure this stuff out all by myself. And that's the last thing I want for you, okay? I want you to stop wasting months. I don't want you to waste the years that I spent of your life trying to get your songs to sound good when there's a simpler, faster, and better way to do that, which leads me to option 3. I want you to learn a proven step-by-step system. System is very important for getting your song sounding radio worthy from somebody who's not only done it, but mastered it and has done it for over 15 years, and be able to do it from your home, right? Using budget equipment, the stuff you already have. So no spending months or years trying to figure out how to get your songs to sound amazing. No spending thousands of dollars on recording and mix engineers and renting out studios. Just creating amazing sounding songs, right? From the comfort of your own home using what you already have. Wouldn't that be awesome? Yes. Yes, it would be awesome. Here we go. I've got good news. I'm creating something called the Radio Ready System. Okay. And it's a complete video tutorial program that shows you how to create songs that sound so good. Again, they're worthy of being played on major radio stations. Whether you get on the radio or not, it doesn't matter. It's the quality piece. Now, this is without a doubt the most comprehensive program out there on making songs from start to finish. And I want to show you what's inside. So first, you're going to get access to my Rethink Your Room video course. Now, this course shows you how to set up your home studio from scratch. So it's optimal for recording and mixing, all on a tiny budget. And this is really cool because I'll show you what I did when I was setting up one of my home studios. I literally filmed the entire process, and I'll show you where I placed the desk and the speakers and how to do that and why to do that and how to measure it out. You're also going to receive a home studio hacks guide where you'll learn things like the best place in the room to put your microphone and the best way to get recordings in a room that isn't ideal for recording. You're also going to learn the best strategic spots to hang acoustic treatment if you have any of that or you go in that direction. So by going through this course first, you'll have your space set up like we talked about in the first step, ready to record and mix songs in the best way possible. And this course is a $100 course, but it's going to be included in the Radio Ready system. Then next, you're going to get my total home recording course. I love this. This is a complete step-by-step course on recording and producing tracks in your home studio or bedroom that sounds so good. The goal is for them to virtually mix themselves, okay? Now, in this course, I virtually take you inside my home studio, so right here where I am, and show you how to record each element and instrument of a song. I literally recorded an entire band in my home studio, and I walk you through every step of it of the way. So I show you how to record literally drum tracks. We took in a drum kit and set up a whole kit in this tiny little room that does not sound good for drums. And I show you how to capture and produce a killer drum sound, including killer guitars, bass, vocal tracks. The whole idea is that they require little to no EQ in the mix. Now, when it comes to the vocals, by the way, I go really in depth in this course and show you how to get stunning vocals every single time by showing you where to position the microphone, where to position yourself in relation to the mic, and tips for how to get the best singing performance. So you can see me doing all this with a vocalist in the room. I also show you how to optimize all your current gear so that you can get better sounding tracks without spending a dime. So that's obviously what I'm all about at the Recording Revolution. That's what I've got good at over the years, is how to create great sounding recordings without using expensive equipment. And guys, like, this is why I named it the Recording Revolution. We're lucky that today we are living in an age where even the most budget equipment sounds better than equipment that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars years ago. It's insane. And the Total Home Recording course will take you through all of your recording needs. And this course is valued at $560, but it's going to be included in the Radio Ready system. Now, I love what Vincent D had to say about the Total Home Recording course. He said, Total Home Recording is definitely the best recording course on the internet. Before going through it, I had a lot of questions about recording workflow and techniques. Now I feel more confident to produce for my band Lithium Bridge and other local bands in Sherbrooke, Canada. Everybody is stoked by the recording, mixing, mastering quality of our last song, Cold Water. I love this. I even tricked some people saying to them that we paid a big producer for the song and we went to a big studio to record it. And they were mind blown when they knew the truth that I was the little guy behind the mixer. So like that sums up just how powerful Total Home Recording is as a course, and I can't wait for you to go through it. Now next, you're going to get access to my Jumpstart Your Mix course. Now, this course will show you step-by-step how to take care of the big elements of mixing. Editing your mix, which I told you is so huge, right? Using EQ, using compression, doing the final master on your mix. Like if you've ever been confused about all the knobs on an EQ or a compressor plugin, what they do, how to use them, this is the course for you. It's going to take care of all of that and get you up to speed with the biggest stages of mixing. Now, I love what Jerry B had to say about the Jumpstart Your Mix course. He said, I went through the Jumpstart series a month ago and just have to say thank you for making these videos. I myself went to a recording school a few years ago. The school was pretty fast-paced, where they'd teach on something and then a day or so later, they were on something else. In the first week, I found myself not able to wrap my head around something, but once I got it down, they were already on something else and I was trying to play catch up. Thank you so much for these videos. Rather than pay $3,000 for a refresher course and have to take 5 weeks off from my job, I can buy your videos a whole lot cheaper and learn a lot more in depth at my own pace. I do have to say these videos help you feel empowered to take on a mix with more confidence than just turning knobs and hoping it sounds better by luck. Now, the Jumpstart Your Mix course is valued at $350, which, by the way, would be a bargain considering that a refresher course at music schools like that I've gone to or that you can get online would cost $3,000. However, the Jumpstart Your Mix course is, of course, included in the Radio Ready system. Now, next, you're going to get my flagship mixing course, Rethink Mixing. Now, while the Jumpstart Your Mix course gets you up to speed with the big elements like editing, EQ, compression, mastering, the Rethink Mixing course takes you step by step through mixing an entire song. I literally take raw tracks that were recorded in someone's basement, okay? I recorded them myself, I know, and I show you how I mix the entire song step by step to a level where it could be played on the radio. Now, what's awesome about this is I can show you how to create wide mixes with clarity and depth, how to get the perfect volume balance every time, how to ensure that your mixes will translate beautifully everywhere else. You don't want your mix to just sound good in your studio but sound awful everywhere else, whether it's the car or your headphones or laptop. We go way in depth on sweetening your mix like we talked about, and I'll show you how to master complex automation moves to breathe life into your tracks. Now, I literally show you every plugin setting I use and every strategy along the way. I don't miss a thing. None of the mixing is done off camera, as it were. And this is all done using stock plugins in my software. So you don't have to go out and buy a bunch of expensive plugins to get your song sounding great. I basically show you how to do it with what you would have. So by the end of the course, you will have the ability to create songs that sound so good they could be played on the radio, all with just using what you already have. Now here's what Alex had to say about Rethink Mixing. I just want to say how absolutely brilliant the training has been. I wish so very much that money I had spent on gear had been spent with you sooner. I came to recording and mixing a little late. I've been doing it for about 6 years. I'm 32, so I haven't had any formal schooling. And just like you mentioned in your videos, I have been piecing it together from snippets of tips and tricks, trying to build that elusive whole picture. I've paid for other mixing production videos on well-known training websites in the past, but none of them actually explain the reasoning like you do, or the workflow so completely. With your videos, I actually understand why things are being done. And Rethink Mixing really does just tie it all together and bring so much clarity to the process. I've started already using your techniques in my mixes, and honestly, it's making mixing fun again and quicker. I love this. So as you can see, Rethink Mixing is really the most comprehensive mixing course. I built it that way on purpose, and it will get your mixes sounding stunning in the fastest time possible. Now, Rethink Mixing course is valued at $590, but of course, it's going to be included in the Radio Ready system. So here's an overview of what you're going to get with a Radio Ready system. Firstly, you get Rethink Your Room video course, which shows you how to set up your room to make it ideal for recording and mixing. Then you're going to get Total Home Recording, my complete step-by-step course for recording tracks in your home studio or bedroom. Tracks that sound so good they virtually mix themselves. You're going to get the Jumpstart Your Mix course, which will get you up to speed with in-depth editing, EQ, compression, and how to master your tracks for final release. You're going to get the Rethink Mixing course, which is my complete step-by-step course for mixing your tracks to a professional level from start to finish. And the total value for all this is $1,600. Now, I should say that in full disclosure, the Radio Ready system is not for you if you really expect a magic pill to get a record deal or to get on the radio, because I can't do that for you. I can't promise you that. It's up to you. And this is not going to be for you if you expect results without putting in any effort. That's the hard part about being a teacher, is I can't make you do anything. I can only give you what you need. You have to be passionate about your music. You have to be willing to put in the time that it takes, okay? Now, what I will say is that if you follow the steps exactly as I teach them, your songs will sound much better. And if your songs sound better, you have a much better chance of having your music heard and appreciated. Now, who these courses have worked for are singer-songwriters, music producers, people who are just starting out, aspiring mixing and recording engineers if you just want to freelance, if you're in a band, and tens of thousands of people who simply have a passion for making music. And my students have ranged from age 12 all the way up to 77. And we've got both guys and girls who take the courses, which is awesome. And they're getting amazing sounding songs. And they range across all kinds of genres of music, because it's the principles that I teach in these courses that are universal. Now, I had two choices with this concept. Option one for me was I could go as cheap as possible and try to sell as many spaces for the Radio Ready system as possible, but this wouldn't incentivize me to really stack on as much value as possible and give you as much as I possibly can. Option two was that it would require a little higher investment on your part, but in exchange, I could devote more resources to guarantee your success. Now, I just want to show you this comment again from Mike J, because I think it sums up what the Radio Ready system is all about. Mike said, I had a track refused by national radio as it wasn't considered broadcast quality. And I remixed it based on your processes. Boom, it's getting radio time. Hug it out. Now, the Radio Ready system is what I wish I had when I started out. I would have saved years of trying to figure this stuff out on my own. Now, if you sign up for it before the webinar ends, I'm going to give you two huge bonuses, okay? Bonus number one is a complimentary ticket to the online songwriting workshop that we're holding this summer. I am so pumped about this. As I showed you in the beginning with the 6 core concepts of a great song, lyrics, melody, and arrangement are all a huge part of what make a great song. So to help you with that, I'm inviting expert songwriters to teach you how to write amazing, memorable, and catchy songs. Now, the cost to attend this online workshop is going to be $500, but when you sign up with the Radio Ready system today, as a bonus, you're going to get a free ticket. The second, I'm going to give you my Rethink Pro Tools course. Now, let me be honest. It does not matter what DAW you use to mix your songs, especially when taking any of my courses. I've designed them so that they're platform agnostic. It doesn't matter. But the best DAW that you have, the best DAW to use is the one that you have, basically. So I want you to stick with that. I've used Pro Tools for over 15 years. That's why I use it. And I use it because, well, when I started out, it was one of the only options out there, and it was the best option. Today, there are a number of different DAWs. They're all great. I own a few of them. However, when you go to professional studios, and if you're going to work with other mixing engineers and producers, most of them use Pro Tools. Okay? So if you haven't picked a DAW or software yet, and you've been thinking of using Pro Tools, or you already use Pro Tools and maybe you wanted to learn how to use Pro Tools in addition to the one you're using, my Rethink Pro Tools course will show you how to use it step by step in the most efficient way so you can mix your songs rapidly. So here's what I do. Over the space of 7 videos, I show you how to create a song from start to finish using Pro Tools. And it's the best way to teach it. So I open up a Pro Tools session. It's blank. I explain how it all works. I show you how to create and record audio tracks, MIDI tracks, virtual instruments. I show you how to use the editing tools. I show you how to mix that track in Pro Tools using stock plugins. I teach you all the shortcuts so you can work fast. With Rethink Pro Tools, I literally take you by the hand through the entire process of recording and mixing a song in Pro Tools as if you were my friend sitting next to me at my computer with coffee in hand. Now, here's what Brent had to say about the Rethink Pro Tools course. Okay, so I just bought Rethink Pro Tools. Oh my gosh, it's awesome. Graham, thank you so much for the series. I learned more in this series than I did in 12 months of Pro Tools classes with an engineer friend of mine. I love how simply and concisely Graham explains everything. If you're new to Pro Tools or you're a moderate user, Rethink Pro Tools will definitely get you up and running with all aspects of recording. Now, the Rethink Pro Tools course is valued at $200, and other places will charge you thousands of dollars, which is crazy, just to learn how to use Pro Tools. But you're going to get it completely free with the Radio Ready system if you join today. So to recap, here's what you're getting. Firstly, you're going to get Rethink Your Room video course, shows you how to set up your room, make it ideal for recording and mixing. Second, you're going to get the Total Home Recording course, my complete step-by-step course for recording tracks in your home studio or bedroom that virtually mix themselves. Third, you're going to get the Jumpstart Your Mix course, which will get you up to speed on editing your tracks, using EQ, using compression, mastering your tracks for final release. Fourth, you're going to get the Rethink Mixing course, which is my flagship mixing course, complete step-by-step course for mixing your tracks to a professional level from start to finish. Fifth, you're going to get a free ticket to our online songwriting workshop where seasoned songwriters are going to walk you through and teach you how to write incredible, memorable, and catchy songs. And then you're going to get Rethink Pro Tools, which is a course that will walk you through step-by-step how to use Pro Tools, which is the most widely used DAW in the industry, which brings the total value to just around $2,300. Now, if this was all you did to get your music sounding as good as you want to hear on the radio, would it be worth it? If all it did for you basically was give you the skills and tools to make one great song that you would be proud of and would blow away all your friends, wouldn't it be worth it? Because then you would know that stuff and you could do it every single time. Now, I want you to consider the way it used to be and the cost of making a song. You would have to hire a recording and mix engineer for a song, and that can cost you anywhere from $500 to multiple thousands of dollars per engineer, still today. And this is adding to the cost of this is renting a professional studio. So every time you wanted to record, every year you had an album, every time you had an EP, this can be a few $100s just for a few hours. You'll probably need to do multiple recordings. So very quickly, recording an entire album of songs can end up costing you over $20,000, no joke. And that's just on the low end if you do it professionally. This is why I'm so adamant about learning how to do it yourself. And that's why it's one of the best investments you can make in yourself. That's why the Recording Revolution exists. You really can get professional sounding songs that are record label quality just by using the inexpensive equipment you have and by recording and mixing your song in your home studio or bedroom. It's possible, but only if you have a solid step-by-step process to follow and learn the skills to do so. So when you consider the cost of getting your songs to sound good the traditional way, the way I had to, you can see why students are happy to pay me $3,000 to spend a weekend with me just to learn this stuff. We get together in workshops and they learn the techniques and tactics over a weekend that allow them to record and mix their own songs and have them sound amazing. And they can go then do that all from the comfort of their home studio. So I'm sure you'd agree that the Radio Ready system would be a good deal at $2,000. And when I open up spaces for it to the general public, the Radio Ready system is going to be $997. It's going to sell for $997. But because you're amazing, you took time to be on my webinar and you've made it this far, I know that you're hardcore, you're passionate about music. So I'm going to give you access to the entire Radio Ready system for just one payment of $397. That's a huge 60% discount on what the rest of the general public are going to be charged for this program. So here's what you need to do next is simply get started, hit the get started button and just complete the checkout process. Then check your email for your login details and you'll be able to get started using the Radio Ready system. It's really that simple. So when you log in to the private members area, you'll be able to access all the courses of the Radio Ready system and begin watching them immediately right here. And by the way, your single one-time payment of $397 gets you lifetime access to these courses. There's no expiration. There's no timetable. This will be your material that you can reference on your phone, your tablet, your computer, anywhere in the world, anytime you want for years and years to come. Now, if you sign up before the webinar ends, I'm also going to give you another bonus. I'm going to personally give you a custom mix critique for one of your songs. Now, I don't offer very many of these anymore. However, after you've gone through the courses in the Radio Ready system, and let's say you record a song, mix it, and you want feedback on it, all you have to do is simply email me your song and your receipt for the Radio Ready system that you bought. And I'll give you feedback and pointers on how to improve your mix that you can then apply to your future songs. So just click the button, get started now for just $397. That's all you have to do is click the button and get started, and you can enroll right now. Now, there are two choices you can take. The first option, for sure, obviously, is you can do nothing. You do not have to take this leap of faith, which, by the way, is a leap of faith that is 100% risk-free. The second option is that you can invest this small amount today in yourself compared to the huge amount of value you're going to get in return, and you simply just give it a shot. If it works for you, and I'm positive it's going to work for you because I've had tens of thousands of students go through this material. If it works for you, great. If not, simple. You just ask for your money back and I'll rush it to you. No questions asked. Because the Radio Ready system comes with a 100% 60-day money-back guarantee. And my guarantee is simple. I want you to be happy. I don't want to take your money if it doesn't deliver results. So if in 60 days of going through this stuff, if you don't feel that I deliver the goods to justify your investment, just contact me. I'll refund every cent to you. No questions asked. It's that simple. And because all the courses are accessed online, there's nothing that you have to send back either. So it's truly no risk. It puts all the risk on me, actually, because I'm going to share all of my proven strategies and tactics for recording great songs. It's taken me over 15 years to scrape together, and yet you have the opportunity to say no thanks at any time. So the real question is it worth gambling a few minutes of your time to potentially have a complete system for making great songs using the equipment you already have? Now, a friendly warning, you only get the bonuses if you sign up before the end of this webinar. Okay, so the $500 ticket to the online songwriting workshop, the step-by-step Rethink Pro Tools course, the custom mix critique for me, they're only for people who join right now before the webinar ends. So when you join right now, here's everything you're going to get, right? The Rethink Your Room video course. You're going to get the total home recording course, my complete step-by-step course for recording tracks in your home studio and bedroom that virtually mix themselves. I love it. That way mixing is so much easier. You're going to get the Jumpstart Your Mix course, which is going to speed up your editing, EQ, compression, how to master your tracks. You're going to get the Rethink Mixing course, my complete step-by-step course for mixing your tracks to a professional level from start to finish. You're going to get a free ticket to attend our amazing online songwriting workshop this summer worth $500. You can get my Rethink Pro Tools course, which will walk you through step-by-step how to use Pro Tools, the most widely used and powerful DAW in the industry. And you're going to get a custom mix critique from me personally. So you're getting $2,450 of value for just one payment of $397 if you join before the webinar ends. Now, the way I see it, There are two types of people, and I see it all the time. There's those that make things happen with their music, and are those who watch other people make things happen. And I don't want you to be the second person. I want to help you create amazing music, because music and teaching are my two biggest passions. So I hope that you'll join me on this journey to create amazing music. Now, as I promised at the beginning of the webinar, you can download the 10 steps we went through today in a printable format. Just go to the link right there, recordingrevolution.com/10 steps, and you can get all the 10 steps downloadable for your checklist. Now, I noticed we had a lot of questions, and I mean a lot, during the webinar. So what I'm going to do now is move to a Q&A to answer some of the questions you have. I'm going to leave the link up so you can join Radio Ready System, so that all the bonuses will still be valid if you join before the Q&A ends. Kevin says, I'm a guitar player, don't have an audio interface or headphones yet. No problem, dude. All this material will work with any interface or headphones. In fact, I would get my my free studio gear guide. Just go to studiogearguide.com and you can get some recommendations. Tony says, if you make surgical cuts using EQ on a track, do you boost to an EQ on a track bus or use another EQ plugin on the same track? So yeah, Tony, when I EQ, I'll do it all in one EQ. I will cut first in terms of what I do first, but then I'll also add my boosts there in the same EQ. That was just one plugin I can bypass and know did the EQ work. Great question. Mike says, great webinar. Thank you. Hey, thank you, Mike. Is there a value in lo-fi work? Consider Bon Iver's. Oh, yeah. So some people don't like lo-fi, that sound that's not as crisp or upfront, but it's a legitimate sound. A lot of my friends make records in that vein, and it's a different style. And it's actually become really popular. You know, the Black Keys they kind of made that super popular lately with just grungy, like chopped off top end. It's not bright. So I think it's totally valid. Brian asks about the courses. Do they need to be utilized in any particular order? Studio space is not ready yet. No, not at all. You can go through the material in any order you want. The beauty of going through Rethink Your Room first is you do that when you're ready to set up your studio. So I would just, that's the order that I put them in is probably the order I would go through them, but you can watch them in any order. Brian signed up. Thank you so much, man. I'm pumped to have you as a student. Jessica asks if piano is the dominant instrument, treat it like lead vocal, best to be mono or stereo. Needs to be pan in the middle. Great question, Jessica. If it's the only main stereo instrument in the mix, I don't mind it staying stereo at all. But a lot of times in a really dense rock or pop mix, if piano is one of many instruments and it's not the main thing, I do it mono. So that it's not taking up and sort of actually smearing the whole stereo spectrum. Justin said that the material in the webinar wasn't exactly new for him. He's been at it for a long time, but it validated all the work I've been doing. In mastering, is the minus 0.5 dB the actual radio standard? There is no radio standard. That is a ceiling on your limiter. Honestly, if it goes on the radio, it's going to be compressed and limited more, made louder. iTunes will adjust the volume. YouTube will adjust the volume. It's mostly for making sure you're just not clipping. My buddy Ian says -1. It really doesn't matter. Minus 0.5 to -1 is great. Curtis says, how easily can these mixing principles be translated to a live setting? Very easily. Because what I teach you is EQ, compression, balance, and the gain staging. And those things are the exact same things you need for live mixing. So I've had a lot of friends actually apply it to live front of house mixing. Sebastian says, do you EQ drums on a drum bus or separate tracks? And if separate tracks, to use a linear EQ. I do both. I'll do a little bit of EQ or compression on the drum bus first. And then I will do most of the hard work to the individual tracks. Timur says, do you consider to talk about some advanced techniques like multiband compression on your free content, or is this strictly restricted to the paid stuff? Oh, dude, just get on my YouTube channel. I talk about multi-band on there. Dude, I try to make my YouTube channel better than other people's paid stuff. Okay. So, if you don't have any money, go watch the YouTube stuff. But the deal that I'm offering you today, I can't sell all those courses. Those courses sell for more than that individual price individually, a lot of them. So this deal is I can't really offer it any other time. So if you want my best material, this is the absolute best way to get it. But if you're just starting out and you're not sure, go through my YouTube stuff. That's why I make it, man. I don't tease content ever. I try to teach. That's what I'm here to do. Dare says, do you take a different approach to your mixing when you're mixing a track that you have used samples? Great question. No, I don't. But if you have samples, you want to bring them in at the beginning during your static mix, right? So step 5 that we talked about today, the static mix is where I want to make sure I've blended the sample. Oh, drum samples. But same thing with virtual instruments, if that's what you're talking about for samples. You treat it like a regular track. You blend it with volume and pan first. And then if it needs EQ or compression, you use it. No different than a real track. If it doesn't, if it sounds good to you, leave it. Chris says, Graham, thanks for putting this on. Learned some new stuff, and I've been in the business for many years. You point out a lot of things that will help me with my mixes. Chris, my honor, dude. Thank you for spending time with me today. Jerry says, Graham, thanks. You made a huge difference in all my mixes. Thank you. I'm glad to help, man. You guys are so sweet. Jessica says, how would you pan strings, violins, viola, cello, bass? I do it differently every time. I just did a hip hop track for somebody, and it's string focused. And during the static mix, I just played I had a bunch of different versions of the string mix. Hey, Dayon, I think Carl is having a problem with the button. I think he's mentioned a couple of things. But yeah, Jessica, about your question with the strings, I will fiddle around with different panning and see what feels right with the song. And it's probably different every song. So that's where you might want to spend more time. And that way you can experiment with different settings. Yeah, like Kane said, if the button's not working, just type in recrevo.com. It's on the screen here, but RECREVO.com. RecRevo, that'll take you a little short link there. Graham, do you have any tips on lyric writing, like where you can go and get more info? I mean, there's people that teach lyric writing. The best teacher in my mind is 2 places: listening to really good songs and studying their lyrics and picking them apart and starting to see patterns in people that write lyrics. Are they very poetic and a lot of metaphors, or is it very much conversational? Is it very flowery? Is it very short and brief? What's the rhyming structure? Is it like traditional A, B, A, B, or A, A, B, B, or just you got to become a student of music. And then 2, I listen to interviews with my favorite songwriters. I just listen to what they talk about and the songwriting process. And like I said, dude, join the Radio Ready system today, please, and you'll get the free ticket to the online songwriting summit that we're going to be doing later this summer. And you'll get all the details about that when it's ready, because I'm going to be bringing in some of the best songwriters that I know and some of the seasoned vets in our industry so that they can bring directly to you the best way to write songs. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. It's going to be amazing, and it's not going to be cheap or free. So if you want a free ticket, you might as well join today. Brandon says, Graham, I just want to say thank you for all your videos. You taught me tons. I'm always sending people your way to learn. Dude, thank you, Brandon. That means so much. Jessica, thanks for hanging out. Let's see. Any more questions? Jeff, what's the best way to blend virtual instruments and acoustic instruments? Just treat them like they're the same, man. A virtual instrument to the listener should sound like a real instrument. So it's all about blending in that static mix section. Jeremy says, what can I do if my master is just not as loud as a professional? It might be that your limiter, it doesn't stay as transparent, so you can't push the volume as much as you like. There are other tricks you can do, like introducing some distortion, which sounds counterintuitive, to actually kind of lop off some of the transients. It also depends on how you mix things, like in the mix, like how you mix the snare drum and mix the kick drum. If those are too loud, they're going to trigger the limiter the most, and then you're going to not be able to get as much volume as you like. Yes, Jeremy, there's a printable version of the 10 steps right here on the screen. Go to therecordingrevolution.com/10steps, 10 steps. And you can then download the PDF right there and you can print it up. Jeff says, what's the best third-party mastering software? A lot of great options. I have Ozone from iZotope, very, very powerful because it's multiple tools in one. I also have Steven Slate's FGX, which is mostly just a compressor and a strategic transient designer limiter. But Ozone's probably your best bang for your buck. Zach says, what are you weighing as options when to use a mono versus stereo delay or reverb? Ooh, good question. You know, I always used to do stereo delays and stereo reverbs. These days, if I'm going to do reverb for glue, like we talked about today, I will do stereo reverb, treat it for glue so it feels like they're in a room, and it'll be subtle. Delays, a lot of times will do a mono delay these days because it helps with the clarity of the mix if I can just point the delay echo in one place and it not spiral all over the place. It's funny, I was listening to a Soundgarden record 2 or 3 years ago, and it was their first record in a long time, and one of my favorite mixers of all time had just done the record, so I was trying to see how he was doing it. And I was listening to all his mixing decisions, and he mixed all the delays in mono. And I could hear the mono delay on Chris's vocal just like 30% to the right, and I love that. So I just started to copy that, and I just went for it. So it really just depends. Like sometimes I just get bored with the stereo delays, so I'll try mono delays. But rarely do I do mono reverbs, but sometimes on a guitar. Like, dude, if you have a guitar, Zach, and you pan it, here's a good example. Have a guitar, you pan it to the left. I will put a mono delay or echo of the guitar on the right, or a slight mono reverb by that guitar on the right. And that allows me to have the nice hard panning, but it gives a little bit of sense of space. Mandeep, if you're having trouble signing up, type in, go to a new tab, and if the button's not working, type in recrevo.com, recrevo.com. Thank you, Dayon. Try that link. But yeah, I will use mono delays or reverbs at times. Great question. Ruben says, thanks for the inspiration to get back on track. Absolutely. My pleasure, man. Pat says, do you have experience with a Roland VS2400 record system? Man, I used to record on a Korg 8-track hard disk recorder, and I will never go back to that. Computers changed my life. Jamie says, would you turn down the gain on the guitar amp after you have your preferred sound to sit better in the mix? No, I crank the guitar amp. Yeah, guitar amps distorted. They sound best a lot of times, especially if it's tube amp, when you crank it and push a lot of signal. So that's how you get the tone that you want on the amp. Then you need to have a microphone and the gain on your preamp in your software that's at a more conservative level. Mike says, how do you know levels on kick and bass guitars are good? Mike, I want to give you a little tip. There's something, go on my YouTube channel and search the low end mix trick. Or go on the Recording Evolution and search the low-end mix trick. Ricardo, thank you so much. He says, I learned a lot. I hope the offer comes around again. I don't have the funds at the moment. Can mastering be done in DAWs? So first part of that, this offer will not come back again. I'm sorry, man. It's going to be, like I said, $997 in the future. This is the only time I can offer at this price. As far as mastering, yes, that's how I master is in a DAW. So all you need to do is render out your final mixes. If you have like an EP, let's say, all 5 mixes, render them out as a stereo 24-bit wave or 32-bit wave. Bring them back into a new session and master them there. I teach you all that in the Jumpstart Your Mix course when I have the whole mastering course in there. I show you how I do it. Cole says, what is the final output level I should put my song to? I noticed that all songs are same volume level. They're not the same volume level, Cole. Actually, I will disagree with you, man. There are some kind of general guidelines for how loud or quiet things should be. But if you just listen to any song, even in today's age, there's more debate than ever what the appropriate loudness is. Some songs are mastered a lot louder than others. And it almost doesn't matter anymore, because if your music's going to go on Spotify, you want to get it to be loud enough. But then honestly, guys, where people are going to be listening to your music is on Spotify, YouTube, even on iTunes. A lot of these software music apps, they automatically adjust the volume of tracks so that they don't sound all over the place. So a lot is changing in terms, you don't have to be the loudest anymore. What I taught you in the mastering step is good enough to get it loud enough. That's how I master stuff. And it's loud enough for me. It's loud enough for my clients. Let's see. Guys, I have a rock progressive. He wants people to take a look on Spotify. Donnie, is there a reason why you create a submix track for everything to dump into instead of using the default master fader? Yeah, Donnie, that's a Pro Tools specific reason in terms of the workflow that I like. If you get on my site and search master fader in Pro Tools, you will find out why. But it's basically the way master faders work and the way they handle plugins and the signal flow. But it's just more of a Pro Tools thing. Yeah, Brian had a good point. The volume war is about over, so got to consider streaming sources. Yeah, things are changing. Floyd says, thanks, Graham. The webinar is what I need now. I'm so glad to help, man. You guys are amazing. We got a few more minutes here. Just a few more minutes of Q&A. What do you need to know? How can I help you? Simon says, what plugins or effects would you normally put on a master other than a limiter? I'll put anything from EQ to tape saturation to compression to multiband compression. I've even put reverb on my master fader. Steven says, do you have advice on people looking to start their own client business to record or mix? Yeah, Steven, I have a lot of thoughts on that. If you get on my site and search get paid to record or mix, there's a couple of videos there where I talk about something called the freelance arc. And that's really important to understand is how you go from no work to free work to paid work to getting paid what you're worth. And it's all there on the site. Prayash, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, says, question, what if the tempo was not set the right point when recording the guide track, but the track was made anyways? How can we get the right tempo at the time of the final recording? So that's a good question, and that depends on your DAW. In Pro Tools, you can map out a new click track mapped to the actual tempo of the song. You can change the metronome to fit what you actually played. So it really just depends on how your software does it. Brian wants to know, what do I think about Waves NX technology? I played with a demo once, but it weirded me out. So, some people really like it. Kane says, where my future studio is, I should have the ability to record outside away from buildings. Would that be better because it's a virtually reflection-free zone? Or is there a reason to record inside? Ooh, I like how you're thinking. Yes, reflection-free, but now you've got the noise of the whole world. Could be a bus down the street or an airplane overhead. So I would experiment, try it. If it's a really quiet place and there's no bugs or birds or anything. So you're trading maybe one problem for another. Favorite delay plugin? I have two. I have the stock Pro Tools Mod Delay. I love that. And I love the Echo Boy from Soundtoys. Jack says, if you send many tracks to the same reverb bus, what panning should you use? Great question. Typically, the easiest thing, Jack, is to make sure that you hit a button on your send. In Pro Tools, it's called FMP, for follow main playlist, or follow main pan, I should say. And it's a button that basically makes the send have the exact same panning as the actual track, no matter where you pan it. That way, where it shows up in the reverb makes sense in the panning. That's what I would do. Kane says, would you use guitar effects pedals in an outboard signal chain for non-guitar instruments? Absolutely. Absolutely. Tons of producers do that. They buy cheap pedals and they'll run vocals and instruments through it. It's a great way to get effects and sounds. Nairman says, any specific plugin from Waves that you recommend and find it better than competitors? No, I don't think third-party plugins are better. Dude, that's why my whole Rethink Mixing course that you get in the Radio Ready system, that's why I do the entire course with stock plugins. And my students are blown away. They listen to the raw tracks and they go, those aren't that great. Poor Graham. How is this ever going to get good? And at the end of that course, you've watched the entire process and you get the same multi-track so you can follow along. And you're like, dang, this mix sounds awesome. And you realize that I just did that in front of you with the stock free plugins in Pro Tools. I do that for a reason so that you don't make plugins the excuse. It's your mixing method and the step-by-step plan. That's the secret. That's why I'm a huge proponent of education. I like plugins. They're fun. I got friends that make plugins, but I know for a fact you could have the best plugins in the world and no mixing system, and your mixes will still sound awful. Or you could have the best mixing system in the world, aka what I teach you, and no plugins or awful plugins, and your mix will sound great. That shows me what's the difference makes. It's not the plugins. It is the system. It's the education. Steven says, I tried out your one microphone technique on my drum set last week. Sounds really good. Heck yeah, that's awesome, Steven. Let's see. Octave says, I record vocals by connecting the mic directly into the audio interface, no preamp. What should I pay attention to? Okay, this is a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, Octave. The audio interface that you're plugging it into is a preamp. It has a preamp built in. So that's why I love audio interfaces. For $99, you can have a little teeny box with 1 or 2 microphone preamps built in, and then it converts already to the digital signal. So you don't need an extra preamp. Just plug in and just make sure you're getting a conservative level. Couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. Yeah, Pete says your voice is starting to sound strained a bit. Dude, I've been talking for 2 hours plus straight. This is why I can't do webinars all the time. This is a lot. Carl says, I purchased your Radio Ready system, got the receipt. When I send you my mix for critique, do you want the mastered version or just the mix down? Either one, dude. You can just do the mix down. But if you put a limiter on that, I don't mind. I'll tell you if I hear it and it sounds awful. If it's like taking away from the mix, then you'll know. Thanks for joining, man. Floyd asks, EQ first or effects first? EQ first. Christian says, do you ever use auto makeup gain on a compressor plugin? Not a fan because it never really does it correctly. I like to manually adjust the volume of the compressor at the end by ear so I can bypass the compressor on and off, and I can really tell if it's the same. Vince, good question. Can you make a record only using VST instruments? Absolutely. It's an instrument, isn't it? Don't get hung up on whether it's real or virtual or digital. If it makes sound and it sounds cool, it's legit. Colin says, how should I start using buses? I'm using Studio One 3 Pro. Colin, if you go through my courses in the Radio Ready system, I outline exactly how to think about buses. The short answer is I like to group tracks by instrument, drums, vocals, guitars, keys, maybe even effects. I'll use buses for groups at the very least, because then you can automate just those faders, or you can add effects to those faders. And then you can sort of have control there. Then I'll use buses for effects like reverb and delay. So that's the short of it. Pat, if you signed up, you should get the receipt. It comes separate from the credit card processor, so you'll get it. Oh, yeah, Carl, I will be gentle on your mix critique. I'm an encouraging person. That's my goal in life, is to encourage. So I'm not going to blast you. I'm just going to try to help you. Thank you, guys. This has been amazing. One question, Dennis. What is your opinion on stereo bass? I'm not a fan, but one of my friends, Jakir King, and he's won Grammys. He'll sometimes put a bass through a stereo reverb and kind of give it some stereo width. So, yeah, great question. Thank you all so much. This is great. I'm going to leave this on the screen. So basically, I'm going to leave the link up. Either you can click on the button or you can go to the link you see on the screen, recrevo.com. Please, if you want all this stuff at this crazy price, this is your day to get it. And if you want the bonuses, you have to get it now while it's live. I'll leave it up for another 15 minutes or so you can join and still get all the bonuses. It has been an honor to have your attention, because I know there's a million other things you could be doing. And for so many of you to stick around the entire time is a huge, humbling honor to me. I am grateful for the time. I'm here to help you. I win if you are getting results in your studio. So please let me know the results you get. I hope to have you as a student. It's been a huge, huge blessing to spend this time with you. Now go Get the Radio Ready system before the price goes up and before the bonuses go away. And I hope to see you out and about.